Okay, I'm going to get started this morning by welcoming you guys back. Welcome back to all of you guys. Welcome to everyone online as well. We got a full day ahead of us today. I'm going to start you with breathing mindfulness meditation. Then afterwards, I'm going to teach you the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense bases. This is going to help you to understand this being that you are, because that's what the Buddha is doing, is teaching you the way the world is, not the way the world should be. And by understanding more about this being, then you'll be able to navigate this world more peacefully. You'll be able to train your mind better by understanding the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense bases. Then I'm going to teach you dependent origination. This is the highest, most ultimate truth of the Buddha, where he's going to show you the detail of why you experience discontentedness and rebirth. If the Four Noble Truths is like the answer, the dependent origination is like the detailed work. If you ever had a teacher where you just wrote an answer on a paper and they said, show me your work, maybe in a math class or something, dependent origination is the work. That's going to show you all the detail of exactly why you keep experiencing discontentedness and rebirth over and over and over again. Then I'm going to teach you accomplishment in view, because you need to establish right view in order to get on to the path to enlightenment. That's understanding the Four Noble Truths and practicing those. But then you need to practice accomplishment in view, which is another level beyond the Four Noble Truths. So I'm going to help you to understand that. Then we're going to go do our excursion. If you guys would like to go on the excursion, we're going to go to Tung today, which it's a reservoir and a nature area, recreation area where they have bungalows around the reservoir. You can go there. I usually go there and have a nice meal. You're kind of looking at the mountains. You get the nice fresh air off of the reservoir. You see the nice trees. There's some zip lines there if you'd like to be adventurous and do some zip lining. There's some ATVs. There's just nature walks if you would like to do nature walks. I think they even have paddle boats if you'd like to do that. They have a massage place over there. A lot of different things to just relax and have fun and kind of bring our excursions to an end. And then when we come back, this evening, I'm going to be teaching you personal existence view, how to get this self out of the way. We're going to go into detail on that. And I'm going to teach you the techniques of how to proactively eliminate it, because that's what you ultimately need to be able to do. All of these teachings here that I'm sharing with you now is the mind getting closer and closer to understanding the teachings that it needs to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. Because everything up to this point has been developing the foundational teachings, but now as part of this retreat, we're pivoting and starting to focus on teaching specifically to help you get to that first stage of enlightenment. If you remember back to the first day of the retreat, I was saying by the time you get to the first stage of enlightenment, it's like being at base camp at Mount Everest, where you've collected up all the things that you need to be able to make your way to enlightenment or make your way to the summit, just like the base camp at Mount Everest. So this is all those things that you're collecting up, the 5 aggregates, the 6 sense bases, dependent origination, accomplishment in view, and all these other things are the things that you need to kind of collect up in order to be able to get to base camp. So we're going to start with breathing mindfulness meditation. I'm going to do some chanting, but I'm going to let you guys do your own meditation. I'm not going to guide you during the meditation because I'm impermanent. The goal is for you to be able to stand up on your own 2 feet and be able to do meditation on your own beyond this retreat. So now that it's Thursday and tomorrow is the end of the retreat, I usually kind of taper off on the guidance of meditation. So that way you guys feel more and more confident to do meditation on your own when you're outside of the retreat. So I'll do the chanting on the way in. And then for yourself, you just know to focus on the breath. And anytime the mind moves off the breath, you cut that off and let it go and come back to the breath. After that period of time of quietness, then we'll just come out with some meditation, with some chanting. So you can do your own meditation because you understand now how to actually do the meditation. You don't necessarily need me to guide you every single meditation. All right, so if you guys would like to join, you're more than welcome to. For those of you guys online, these chanting sheets are on our website at buddhadailywisdom.com. You can click on free books and then just scroll down towards the bottom and you'll see the chanting sheets there. Arahang Samma Sambuddho Mahakawa Bhutang Mahakavanang Apivateyami Savakato Mahakavata Tammo Dhammang Namasami สุปฏิปันโนมะคะวะโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนะโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมะคะวะอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสตาตาวามนุสรังพุทโธภาควาติ อะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธมหะเกวาโพตังมหาเกวันหังอภิวาเตมิสวากขาโตมหาเกวตาตัมโมดามังนามาสามิสุปฏิปันโนมหาเกวโตสาวกสังโฆสังฆังนามามินับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะนับโมตัสสะภะคะวะโตอะระหะโตสัมมาสัมพุทธัสสะอิติปิโสมหะเกวาอะระหังสัมมาสัมพุทโธวิชาจารนังสัมมุโนสกาโตโรกาวิตุอนุเตโรปุริสาดามาสติสัตตาตาวามนุสนังปุตโตภะคะวะติ Okay, if you guys would like to slowly make your way out of meditation. Once again, good morning to all of you guys. Nice to see everyone here. Good morning to everyone online who's joining as well. I'm going to share with you guys a bunch of teachings today. We're going to go in depth with a lot of things that are needed in order to be able to get to the first stage of enlightenment. But the things that I've been teaching already in this retreat, an individual would take a certain amount of time to really absorb that and then not only learn, investigate, and examine, but then also reflect on it and then practice it. So depending on where you are in your practice, if you're just getting started, these things that I'm going to share with you now for the rest of the retreat over the next 2 days, it might be like, okay, that's good information. I'll get to that when I get to it, right? Because maybe you need to really focus on absorbing the Eightfold Path and all those other teachings first. So the things that I'm sharing with you, don't feel like you need to immediately understand these right now, because the way the teachings of the Buddha are, particularly as you get closer and closer to the stages of enlightenment, you really need to take some time to understand them. You know, something like the universal truth of impermanence, I can explain it to you in about a minute or two. It'll take you all of about maybe 3 minutes to independently verify it. And you got it, right? The world around you is constantly changing. Everything is impermanent. But as you get closer and closer to the stages of enlightenment, the teachings that you're learning, it's going to take you some time to really think about it, you know, be able to actively learn it, think about it, reflect on it, practice it. It can sometimes take you multiple months. I've even seen some students take upwards of a year or so, even just to get one teaching like dependent origination or about personal existence view and realizing non-self and things like this. So it would be unwise to put an expectation on yourself that by the end of this retreat, you're going to know every single thing that I'm sharing with you, and you're going to be able to implement that perfectly, because that's not the way any of this stuff works. It's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So if this is your first real big exposure to the teachings of the Buddha, as I share with you all the things that I'm going to be sharing with you, this is going to be helpful for you, but you may not be ready to really sink your teeth into this right now. Maybe you would rather instead over the next several weeks and months, really focus on those foundational teachings that I shared up to this point. But eventually, as you're putting together the Eightfold Path really well, you're going to notice that your mind's getting into those jhanas, which we talked about last night, those preliminary phases that the mind's going through, where you're starting to experience enhanced qualities of mind. And that's an indication for you that you've been putting together the Eightfold Path really well for a long-term, consistent period of time. And now you start pivoting and you start focusing on the things that I'm starting to share with you now for the rest of the retreat. I'm going to share with you the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense bases. This is going to help you to understand this being who you are, because the Buddha is helping you to be able to understand this being in the world around you. One of the ways you might think about this is like the instruction manual to this being who you are, right? Nobody ever handed you an instruction manual and said, here, this is how to understand a human being and what a human being experiences. But that's essentially what the Buddha is doing. For those of you guys that are into video games, he's giving you the cheat codes for how to kind of decode this particular being that you are, right? And start to decipher what's going on with this being, because you start experiencing all these different things in life. You start having these sensations, you start having these thoughts, you start having these aches and pains throughout the body, you start experiencing different feelings, and an individual doesn't necessarily know where those things are coming from and what that's all about until you start understanding human beings and understanding this being who you are. So I'm going to walk you through this and helping you understand the 5 aggregates and the 6 sense spaces so you can understand this being who you are, and now you can start training your mind more and more closely and navigate the world more peacefully. And just like always, if you have questions, you guys can use the microphones here, and then for those of you guys online, you can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and unmute your microphone to ask any and all questions that you like. So these 5 aggregates, they're also referred to as the 5 collections, the 5 elements, or you might think of them as the 5 criteria. This is what makes a living being a living being. It describes a living being. And this is important for you because you're going to need to know what a living being is so that you're not causing harm to living beings, so that you can cultivate loving kindness and compassion for all beings, so you can practice the first precept and things of this nature. So I'm going to share with you each one of these aggregates. And just like all the teachings of the Buddha, you never believe any of these things. I'm going to share it with you so you can understand it intellectually. But then as I'm even teaching you right here, you can be reflecting on this to be able to independently verify if it's true or false, because you know that you are a living being and you should be able to independently verify that you have all of these 5 things. So I'll walk you guys through this. So the first aggregate is form. What form is that any living being is going to have a physical form, a physical body. There's going to be physical structures, right? So we know that as human beings, we have physical structures, we have form. And so does a squirrel, so does a rabbit, so does a dog, so does a frog, so does a bird and a snake. They all have physical form, okay? So that's the first aggregate, or the first criteria of what makes a living being a living being. Then a living being is going to have feelings. They're going to experience all of these feelings, pleasant feelings, painful feelings, neither painful nor pleasant. These are the results of certain experiences that that being has in their mind based on the 6 sense bases. I'll explain to you guys what those are here in a moment. There's certain contact coming through these 6 sense bases, and that's producing certain feelings in the mind. The pleasant feelings are things like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. The painful feelings are like sadness, anger, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety, things like that. The neither painful nor pleasant feelings, this is like shyness or uncomfortableness. It's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. I gave you an example. We talked about the Four Noble Truths of like someone, if you were sitting on public transportation and somebody came in and sat really, really close to you and your body was touching their body, you might say, it's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. You're just kind of uncomfortable and dissatisfied in that situation. So an individual who's a living being is going to have these feelings. These are the results of craving, desire, attachment in the mind, and they're experiencing contact through the 6 sense bases, which is triggering those cravings, desires, attachments. Then there's perceptions. Perceptions are a belief or opinion, a view of what may or may not be true. You might think of these as assumptions. That's what a perception is, a belief or opinion or view. It may or may not even be true. It's the way that things seem to be, not necessarily the way things actually are. Then there's volitional formations, which are choices and decisions that are made. So these are any choices or decisions. A living being is going to have free will, be able to make their own choices and decisions. And then there's a consciousness, which is the mind. This is like a container. Okay, so these are the 5 aggregates, just introducing them to you. So now you can verify that you have all 5 of these, because you have physical form, you have feelings that are in the mind, you have perceptions, which are views and opinions about the world that may or may not even be true, right? Then there's volitional formations. You make choices and decisions, and then you have a consciousness or a mind. And you can see not only that you have these, but also, animals like squirrels, rabbits, birds, things like this. All these beings have all 5 aggregates, okay? These is what's determining what is a living being and what isn't a living being. And it's important for you to be able to understand this, because in order to practice something like the first precept, which we were talking about a few days ago, you're going to need to know what is a living being. The first precept is about living compassionately for the welfare of all living beings. You're going to need to be able to know how to determine what is a living being and what isn't a living being. You're also going to need to know these 5 aggregates, because your mind will have a tendency to cling to them and hold on to them and want them to be permanent. And things like a phone, things like a relationship, things like a computer or a car or something like this, maybe your home, it's pretty obvious that your mind can cling to those and crave permanence. But these things, it's not always as obvious. So for example, an individual could cling to this physical body, wanting it to be permanent. And now when they experience impermanence with the physical body, their mind's experiencing discontentedness. The impermanence of the physical body is when you experience sickness, right? Or you get a wrinkle or a pimple or a mole, or you start losing your hair, or you get gray hair, or you start gaining weight, or something like this. This is the impermanent nature of the body. Maybe you don't move as fluidly as you did when you were young, and you're starting to feel the aches and pains in the body, and now the mind's craving certain things with this physical form. So your mind can cling to this physical form, and if your mind's clinging to it, you're going to experience discontentedness. So if your mind's holding on and craving permanence, there's going to be discontentedness. But if your mind swung all the way to the other side, where you could care less what's going on in this body and you didn't care for it and take care of it, there's not going to be peace and joy there either. So you need to come to the middle, where you understand that this body is impermanent, but it's wise to make wise decisions to care for it as best as you can. This body is slowly deteriorating. That's what we're doing as we get closer and closer to death. This body is slowly deteriorating, but we can kind of make decisions through things like the food that we take, exercise, visiting doctors, and things of this nature. We can do things like that, making wise decisions to care for it. And we can do that without a craving for permanence. We can understand that this body is impermanent, where we're not over here craving permanence, but we're also not over here we could care less about it either. So we can come to the middle, make wise decisions to care for it, all the while realizing it is deteriorating. So the mind needs to get to the point where you're not clinging to this physical form, wanting it to be permanent, craving and longing, yearning for it to be permanent. Then the mind can also cling to these feelings, especially the pleasant ones, but even the painful ones, and neither painful nor pleasant, a mind can cling to the feelings as well. You might say, I am so happy. I am so excited to see you. Oh my gosh, I just want you to be here. I'm so excited. I enjoy spending time with you. And your mind's clinging to those pleasant feelings. But then when your family or friends leave and they need to go somewhere else, oh, mom needs to go back home. I don't want her to leave. I'm going to miss you so much. This is the mind clinging and craving for that feeling of the excitement to be permanent, craving this person to be permanent in your life. And now when the mind experiences impermanence with this, the mind doesn't like it. You can cling to the painful feelings. You can say things like, I am so angry. And now the mind wants to cling to that anger. And it can even turn into bitterness and hostility and resentment. Maybe you've had a boyfriend or girlfriend in the past, and maybe they did something that was unwise and it triggered one of your cravings. And now maybe you're clinging to those feelings of anger and bitterness and hostility, and it's turned into resentment, right? Or maybe you're clinging to some guilt for some things that you've done in the past. Maybe you've made some certain unwise decisions yourself in the past, and you experienced guilt because maybe you had a craving for permanent where you wanted to be perfect. And since you weren't perfect in the past and you made some unwise decisions, now maybe in the present moment, you're clinging to some guilt and holding on to those feelings. And you need to be able to understand that that's not helping you to cling to those feelings of guilt or shame or anything else. So you can train your mind to let that go. So it's not always as apparent that the mind's doing that. So that's why you need to know the 5 aggregates so you don't cling to these feelings, because you can have experiences in the past where you're now in the present moment experiencing feelings based on those things. Sometimes people call that trauma, and they think that it's permanent. It's not permanent. It's just that you've had a certain experience in the past. You had certain feelings based on cravings getting triggered in the past. And now in the present moment, the mind is still clinging to those feelings or clinging to those experiences and forming feelings now in the present moment based on experiences that happened in the past. You can free your mind of all of that by eliminating the clinging to the feelings and eliminating the clinging to those past experiences that you had as well. Then an individual can cling to their perceptions, their beliefs and opinions of how things seem to be, right? A perception is just your views and opinions. Like, say a certain political party has a certain political views and opinions. Again, they may or may not be true or may or may not be accurate, but an individual can cling to those. And now when you're around family or friends, you're arguing and arguing and arguing and trying to get this person to agree with your political views and opinions. That's how it leads to discontentedness. Or other perceptions. Maybe you see somebody, maybe you meet someone brand new, and you cling to a certain perception of who you think this person is and how you think this person is. There's perceptions in all different parts of your life, and you need to be sure that you're never clinging to a perception. This is so detrimental to people's lives that if you're training to be a police officer, they actually train you not to cling to your perceptions, because you can make life or death decisions for other people or for yourself. If you cling to your perceptions, you could be actually making unwise decisions. I'll give you an example of this so you understand more of what a perception is and how detrimental it is for you to actually cling to your perceptions. If I was a police officer and I got dispatched to a call, let's just say they came over the radio and they say, hey, there's this convenience store where someone's getting robbed. They have a gun and we need you to go down there and take care of this. And of course, they speak very differently on the radio. They don't speak the way that I just spoke. They have all kinds of codes and all kinds of stuff like that, right? But nonetheless, they're dispatching this police officer down to the convenience store. And this person's got a gun and they're being robbed at gunpoint. Okay, so now the police officer rushes down to the convenience store. They sling open the door to the convenience store and they see somebody on the ground with a bullet wound and they're bleeding all over the ground. And there's someone in a black hoodie with a gun pointing it at the person on the ground. Well, if you cling to your perceptions, you might walk into the store, pull your gun as a police officer, and start shooting the person in the black hoodie. But if you did that, you actually might have just killed an innocent person, because the cashier might be the person in the black hoodie who actually managed to get the gun away from the robber and actually shot the robber, and the robber might be the one who's out on the ground bleeding out. So that's why they train police officers not to cling to your perceptions. Don't make assumptions. When you open the door, you say, police, police, put down your gun. And if you're the person who's the cashier and you turn and you see the police, oh, thank goodness somebody's here, you'll gladly put your gun down. But if you're the person who's doing the robbing and you see the police officer, you might actually turn towards the police officer with your gun, and then that's when they're going to actually shoot you, right? So this is very detrimental to your life, because if you cling to your perceptions as a police officer, you could actually kill an innocent person, and now you're in jail yourself for the rest of your life. So you have a split second to make a decision as a police officer in that kind of situation. So you potentially aren't going to be in that same kind of situation, but I just use this example for you to help you see how detrimental it is to actually cling to your perceptions. Here's another maybe lighter one that's maybe more common that you'll actually experience. Let's just say you go to your child's in their room, and you say to them, hey, I need you to clean up your room. Your room's getting a little bit messy. Would it be possible for you to clean up your room? And they're like, sure, mommy and daddy, I'll clean up my room. Okay, great. I'll be back in about an hour to check in on you and see how you're doing, right? And now you go cook some food, you're doing your thing, maybe playing in the garden or whatever it is that you're doing. And now you come back and you walk into your child's room, opening the door, and there's books scattered all over the floor and the room is a complete mess, right? Well, if you walk in clinging to your perception is your child didn't clean their room. And if you're clinging to a perception here, a view or opinion of the way things seem to be, you might think your child didn't actually clean their room. And because of your craving for them to do things your way, you might start yelling and hollering and screaming at your child or punishing your child. Where in reality, if you, instead of clinging to your perceptions, you started asking questions, because that's how you ensure that you don't cling to your perceptions. You ask questions, just like the police officer. Put your gun down, right? Police, put your gun down. As a parent, you can walk into your child's room and say, hey, what happened? You've got books all over the floor. What happened here? And they're like, oh, mom and dad, I cleaned my room. Right before you walked in, 30 seconds, a minute before you walked in, I bumped into the bookshelf and the books fell all over the floor. I was actually just getting ready to pick them up. I didn't even realize you were coming, right? So if you walk in with the perception that there's these books on the floor and now they didn't clean their room, if you cling to that perception and you have a craving that they do things your way, you can start yelling and hollering at your child, and now you've just damaged your relationship with your child. So you're not interested in clinging to any perceptions. I'll give you one more example from my own life. One time, so my wife, she's a massage therapist, and when we lived in the USA, she used to do massage out of our house, and she actually does that now too, to a certain degree. Well, one time she was off work, and she wasn't supposed to be working that day, and I knew that she was at home by herself, and she was off from work. And I had finished up my work a little bit early. It was like 12 or 1 p.m. And I was like, sweet. I'm going to go home and surprise. At this time, she was my girlfriend. I'm going to go home and surprise my girlfriend. And I'm going to show up early. And then we'll maybe go out and do something and have a good time. Right? So she didn't know I was going to be coming home. So I came home. And when I came home, I opened the door to our apartment. And there was these big old shoes that weren't my shoes. And they were obviously male's shoes. And I hear this laughing and giggling in the room. And I was like, what's going on here? And I just walked into the house, put my stuff down, walked into the apartment, put my stuff down. I sat in the living room, which is right where the door for the bedroom that they were in, what was happening, I didn't know, right? So I just sat there. And then when she came out, maybe like 10 minutes later, I was like, hi, how are you? And she was like, oh, hey, I didn't know you were home. And I was like, yeah, what's going on? What's happening? She was like, oh, one of my clients had a back pain and they called me up. And even though it's my day off, I thought I'd invite them over to be able to get a massage. And I was like, oh, okay. Right. But if I would have clung to some perceptions there, I might have barged into the door. I might have like, what are you guys doing in here? Are you cheating on me? What are you doing? Right. So this is where if you cling to a perception, you can start making a lot of unwise decisions, and you can start damaging relationships and start making decisions that is producing unwholesome karma for you. So you would like to get to the point where you're not clinging to any perceptions whatsoever. These are your views and opinions of the way things seem to be. And the way that you do that is you ask questions. By asking questions and being patient, then you can ensure that you're not clinging to any perceptions. So if I had a craving to know what my girlfriend at the time was doing right now, I might have barged into the room and created all kinds of unwholesome karma, right? Because she would have lost a customer. It would have maybe rippled into the community. People would have talked badly about her and about me, and now she wouldn't have been able to get as much business. So if you have a craving to know something right now, that craving, desire, attachment, it's going to produce unwholesome karma, like we were talking about with the natural law of karma yesterday. You saw the words of the Buddha. Whenever you make decisions through craving, anger, and ignorance, it's going to produce unwholesome karma. So it's important to never cling to your perceptions. Take your time, be patient, and ask questions. And that's going to help you to ensure you don't cling to your perceptions. Then you can cling to your volitional formations. These are your choices and decisions. Let's just say I made a decision that I'm going to travel to Australia. And I made this decision 6 months in advance. And maybe I booked my airplane ticket or something like this. And maybe I booked it as a refundable ticket. And I even booked maybe my hotel as a refundable hotel and all these kinds of things. But I'm so excited to go to Australia. I told all my friends, I told all my family, all these people know that I'm going to Australia. I took off time from work and all these other kinds of things. Well, now as we get closer and closer to the time that I need to go to Australia, maybe there's been some impermanence. Maybe I've had a downfall in my income. Maybe I even got laid off of my job and I no longer have an income. But I'm so excited and I'm craving so much to go to Australia, and I'm clinging to these decisions that I made in order to go to Australia, that even as time gets close to go to Australia and I really don't have the money to do it, maybe I still do it instead, because I'm clinging to this decision and I'm unwilling to let go because I'm getting all these pleasant feelings, all this excitement from it. And I don't want to go to all my friends and family and tell them like, oh yeah, I don't have money, I can't go to Australia, because maybe I feel embarrassed of the situation that I'm in. But instead, maybe I still go. And now I put myself into debt by maybe $4,000, $6,000, $8,000, where maybe the wise decision would have been to just not cling to your decision. Let go of your volitional formation, let go of your choices and decisions, and now just choose to stay at home, right? This is something that can cause you a lot of difficulties. If you're craving and clinging, it's going to produce unwholesome karma for you. So if you don't cling to your decisions, you'll be comfortable to let go and not continue on that trip, if that's what would be a wise decision for you. Only you can make that decision in that situation. I'm not sharing with you what you should or shouldn't do. I'm just showing you what the problem is, that if you cling to your choices and decisions, craving for those to be permanent, you might make a decision. And then even when impermanence, everything is changing, you don't change your decision. You're unwilling to let go of your decision. I'll give you another example of this. Several years ago, some students in the U.S., they were invited me to the U.S. for a retreat. So I went there for a retreat and I taught a retreat, and they said, okay, we would like you to come back next year and teach another retreat. And I said, okay, sure, I can do that. So they were planning it about 10 months in advance, and they were planning it. They were really excited. They actually planned 2 different retreats, one in Atlanta, Georgia, and one in Massachusetts. And I was supposed to fly to, I think, Massachusetts first or Atlanta first, and then go to the other city. And there was going to be these 2 different retreats, and the students were going to get together at these 2 different locations. Well, about 2.5 months prior to that, they started talking to me about some different things that they were working on and some things that had changed. And they were asking my opinion of what they should do. The one person who was hosting the retreat, she had become pregnant, and her baby was due like a month before the retreat. And she was the one who was doing a lot of the hosting and organizing and coordinating. The other person who was hosting the retreat, she actually got injured at her job, and she hadn't even been working for like 6 months, and she wasn't going to be going back to work. And actually the place where we were going to be hosting the retreat was at her work. It was at a university, at a college. And she was in the middle of this potential lawsuit where she was going to be suing the university. And they were like, hey, look, the university still said we can hold the retreat. And even this person said, hey, we can still do this retreat in Atlanta if you would like to, but I'm just going to be really tied up with my child. What do you think we should do here, David? And I said, well, I think you guys should just let go and just cancel the retreat and not actually do it. And that's ultimately what they decided to do, is not do the retreats. But if you're clinging and craving and you're so excited and you just can't wait to go, then you're going to cling to those decisions. You're not going to be comfortable to let go. right? So when you make decisions, sometimes you're going to make decisions 10 months in advance like this, but then there's going to be a bunch of impermanence and a bunch of change. And whenever you make a decision, you need your decision to be 100% wise decision. And if you don't factor in all the impermanence and you're just clinging to your volitional formations, to your choices and decisions, you're going to implement a decision that is otherwise unwise. Right? You need to be able to make sure every single decision is wise so that it produces wholesome karma for you. So when you're making decisions where you're planning in the future for something to occur, you need to account for impermanence. So when I do things, I'm always thinking that may or may not occur, right? If I'm planning something a year from now or 2 years from now, that thing may or may not occur. Right? Because you never know what impermanence is going to happen along the way. And you need to be willing to let go, that you don't cling to your volitional formations, to your choices and decisions. So you need to be able to look at that as you're making decisions about things. Don't cling to them. Understand that these decisions are impermanent, because if you cling to your decisions, you'll have discontentedness. You need to be willing to let go in situations where impermanences happen. And then the same thing with the consciousness. The mind itself has an identity inside the mind. In the unenlightened state, you'll cling to things like your culture, your ethnicity, your sexual orientation, your nationality, your job or occupation, any number of things. You can cling to this as who you think you are. Like, I am a Buddhist teacher. The mind might cling to that and think that that's who you are. And now when you hear things that are agreeable to you and someone says, all Buddhist teachers are lovely, kind, warm, and gentle, you'll get so excited about that because you think that they're talking about you. But then when people say something negative and degrading and disparaging about Buddhist teachers, now you'll be frustrated, agitated, or annoyed. So it's a matter of understanding that you're performing certain roles in your day-to-day life, but not cling to that as who you think you are. So I do all kinds of things, right? Someone might call me a Buddhist teacher. Someone might call me a father. Someone might call me a husband. Someone might call me a resident of Thailand, any number of things. An American, somebody might call me that. But just because people think of me in that way doesn't mean my mind has to think of myself in that way, right? So you need to get to the point where you understand that any of this kind of identity, it doesn't determine who you are, right? Sometimes people are taught, I am an alcoholic, or I am an addict, right? And this is important in those programs because it helps them to understand that they should never go back to drugs or alcohol. But when you cling to that as who you think you are as an identity, there can be guilt and shame around that, right? This is just choices and decisions that we made in the past. This is a volitional formations, choices and decisions that we made in the past to use drugs and alcohol, but that doesn't define who we are today as a person. We don't have to adopt that identity of who we are. We can just understand that, yeah, we chose to use drugs and alcohol in the past, but that doesn't mean that I have to adopt that identity of who I think I am as a person based on some choices and decisions that I made in the past. So the mind needs to get free of clinging to any kind of identity in the mind, where you understand that, sure, I used to use drugs and alcohol in the past, but that doesn't define who I am today. Sure, I share the teachings of the Buddha, but I don't have to adopt the identity that I am a Buddhist teacher. Sure, this being chooses to live in Thailand, but I don't have to adopt the identity of I am a resident of Thailand, because now when someone says everyone in Thailand is blah, 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 I don't get angry. I don't get frustrated, right? But if you cling to this identity, any kind of identity in your mind of who you think you are, then it's only a matter of time before someone says something either agreeable or disagreeable, and now you're going to experience pleasant feelings or painful feelings. So these 5 aggregates are something that you need to be sure that you're not clinging to. And they're not always so apparent. That's why the Buddha makes sure that you're aware of them. One is to identify living beings so that you can practice compassion and loving kindness towards all beings, and you're not causing harm to any living beings, but also so that you're not clinging to these because you have all 5 of these. Remember, you can't cause someone else to be discontent, but you can cause them harm. If you cause harm to someone's physical body, their material possessions, or their reputation, you're going to experience harm coming back to you. So you'd like to get to the point where you can identify what is a living being, so that way you're not causing any harm to any living beings. Do you guys have any questions on any of these 5 aggregates or the clinging aspect of it or anything I've been talking about? Yeah, if you guys would like to get a mic. For those of you guys online, remember you can put this into Facebook, YouTube, or Zoom, or you can raise your hand in Zoom and ask any questions that you like.
So I was wondering about all types of relationships, like romantic relationships, but also friendships and stuff. So how does this not, I mean, this can also, for example, be easily interpreted as like, I choose to be, with a partner or with a friend, but then later they're like, for example, saying they're angry or something about anything, and they're, saying bad words towards you, and then you somehow just choose to not continue that relationship. Do you know what I mean?
No.
Okay. So how is this not an excuse for just saying, okay, I decided, for example, to be in a relationship with whomever, but then I don't like their behavior or whatever about them or about the situation. Something has changed. So I just don't cling to my past decisions of being in that relationship and just say goodbye, like, more easily. And I'm not, committed as I should be or something.
I understand what you're saying. So I'll use this example from my life, right? So I actually had a wife before my current wife, and I don't regret any relationships I've ever been in. I love all those people, meaning I have a genuine interest in seeing them be well, and I learned something in each one of these relationships. But the relationship I had prior to my current wife, she was also a Thai woman as well. And when we got married, in my opinion, I got married for the wrong reasons. I didn't understand myself and what I was interested in, and I got married for the wrong reasons. I woke up on my honeymoon realizing that, I made a big mistake here. But I sticked with the relationship for 5 or 6 years, and I was just clinging to this decision and holding on and holding on and holding on. And I was experiencing a lot of painful feelings during that situation. I was taught that once you get married, it's a permanent decision and you need to live with that person for the rest of your life. And I wasn't interested in the stigma of having had a divorce and explaining it to my family and all these other things, right? So I clung to this decision. So for those 5 or 6 years, it was really painful for me. But eventually I got to the point where I overcame some of those things, and I decided to end the relationship. There's no harm in ending a relationship. A decision to have a relationship isn't permanent. So when I talk about aversion, where we push away a relationship, that's different than ending a relationship. There's no harm in ending a relationship. Relationships aren't permanent. But the difference is, from the outside looking in, they look very, very much the same, that the relationship is ending. But the difference is, when you have aversion, an individual will push away a person or a relationship thinking that they are the ones who are causing their discontent feelings, and they're having wrong view. That they think that if I push this person away, that's going to solve my anger and frustration that I have. This is wrong view. But you can also make a wise choice to end a relationship. And now, if there's any discontentedness in your mind, it's coming from your own mind. So you can maintain right view. So there's no harm in ending a relationship. You don't have to hold on to a relationship. There's nobody that's requiring you to be committed in a relationship. That's a personal choice that you're making, and that can change at any given time. At the beginning of this relationship with my first wife, I was committed to it. But then after we got into the relationship and I started looking at the things that were happening and started to uncover a few things, and permanence was happening, I realized this wasn't the best relationship for me, and it was better for me to end the relationship and move on. And it worked out great, because now I'm with somebody who we've been together for 19 years and we'll be together for the rest of this life. I sometimes see her Facebook profile, and she's now had the things that was interested in experiencing that I wasn't interested in experiencing with her. So she's living the life that she would like to live. I'm living the life that I would like to live. But together, it just wasn't working out. So we can choose to step away from that, and there's no harm in that. Are you thinking that there's some harm in choosing to end a relationship?
Does it work? Yeah. No, not really, but I was just wondering how, or I think these can also be probably like misinterpreted as, it's just super easy to take anything that's not going your way, or any, like, as an excuse to just end any type of relationship, or just go back on your decisions?
Well, no decision is permanent. And if you've made a decision and later on you've come into some other information that you would make that decision differently, you can do that. There's no harm in that. Just because you made a decision 3 months ago or 6 months ago doesn't mean you have to stick with it. What you might be used to is that if you change a decision, somebody gets angry and frustrated because you've changed your decision, but you're not causing that anger and frustration. It's their mind that's causing it itself because they're clinging to your decisions. They have expectations of you, wanting you to do things a certain way, but you're not causing that anger. So if this decision is unwise for you to implement, you would be wise to not implement it. And that's what the Buddha is teaching you, is don't just go forward because 3 months ago or 6 months ago you made a decision. Don't just go forward and implement that decision even though you know it's unwise because it's going to produce unwholesome results. Don't just cling to it because you told someone you were going to make that decision. Don't just cling to it just because you made that decision 3 to 6 months ago, because that would be unwise, because you need to get to the point where you're making 100% wise decisions and you're not clinging to the decision, but you're also not clinging to the friend and be like, oh, if I don't come to their party, they're going to get upset. I told them 3 months ago that I'm going to come to their housewarming party, and now something's changed and I can't go. If I change my decision, they're going to get upset. This is your mind being bound up, and your mind is craving and clinging for your friend to be permanently peaceful. And now you have this other important thing that you would rather go to, but instead you drag yourself to their housewarming party, and now you feel miserable the whole time you're there because you would rather be over here. So there's no harm in changing that decision. If your friend gets angry and frustrated, they're not practicing true love. They're practicing craving, desire, attachment, and this is actually helpful for you to know. And there's ways to let this person understand in a polite and respectful way, but their mind can still get upset because they're craving and clinging in the relationship with you. This is where I teach the other course next month. I'm going to be teaching harmony in relationships. I'm going to be teaching students how to make sure you don't have craving and clinging in your relationships. Because if you have craving and clinging in your relationships, they're going to be discontent. And you need to be able to learn how to have relationships with people without having craving and clinging in them. Mm-hmm. Yep, you're welcome.
I have a question for you, David. I'd like to hear you talk more about, guilt and shame and remorse and all of that. And like all feelings, often when there's a problem, like you think, what's the cause? What's the reason? But I often think also, like, what's the function of it? Like, there's this problem. There's a function of it. It's helping me do something. But like, say I've hurt somebody, or I have a lot of guilt. I have remorse. I should feel guilty if I accept having done something wrong, and that's part of dealing with it towards the person I've also hurt. And it feels sort of like, oh, I get guilt and remorse. I'm just going to cut that off, let it go, and just bounce along into the day. I feel like I have to have it. I feel I owe it to the person I've hurt to show remorse and guilt, and just to live with it somehow.
Can you give me specifics so that I can teach you in a more detailed way?
It could be so many things. Well, I mean, I won't talk about myself. I mean, what I'm thinking of, it's a very personal issue. I just to really sort of, I don't know, say you rob somebody, or say you in a drunken rage beat somebody up and they're permanently disabled.
Okay. So if you've done those kinds of things, those were unwise decisions, right? And there's certain craving, anger, and ignorance there that somebody has chosen to beat somebody up and now they're disabled. And that individual isn't going to be on the path to enlightenment, right? They're not going to be learning the things that I'm teaching here, because someone who's learning the teachings of the Buddha, they're not going to go out and do those kinds of things if they're actively, truly learning to become a better and better person. So the teachings of the Buddha aren't about going out in the world, doing all these unwise and unwholesome things, and then just cut off the feelings and just haphazardly go through the world and treat people any which way. That's not what we're teaching here, right? What we're teaching you to be able to do is this craving and clinging that the mind has, is clean that up and eliminate that. Get to the point where you're making wise decisions, that you're treating people in a loving and kind and compassionate way. So the scenario that you're having in your mind wouldn't exist, right? So if you're experiencing guilt or shame about things, those are from cravings, desires, attachments. And if you made unwise decisions in those situations, part of your karma, part of your unwholesome karma, is that you're experiencing the guilt and the shame. That's part of your unwholesome karma. And that's why by cleaning up your moral conduct, you can get to the point where you don't have those feelings, because you know the way you're conducting yourself is not causing harm whatsoever. So for example, I'll give you an example from my life. About a year and a half ago, I was here talking at the temple, and there were some students here, a bunch of people. There's probably 40, 50 people here learning. And somebody started asking me questions about the wars, the wars at this time in Israel, and there was the war in Ukraine was going on, and they were having a lot of trouble with this, and they were having discontentedness related to it. And they were asking me how to eliminate that. And I was talking about different things, and at different times during my talk, I was saying, or my response, I was saying, it's unfortunate that these wars are occurring, right? And that's what I was saying. And then I was teaching all these different things. Well, after I taught that person and they were getting the help that they need, another person picked up the mic, and she was really angry. She was really bitter and hostile and harsh. And she just thought that I was the worst thing ever. She was like, how dare you say that those wars are unfortunate? It's because of people like you that these wars are happening, and you should be condemning the war, and you should be doing this and doing that. She had all these expectations of how I should have replied. And because I used the word unfortunate, she didn't like that. She had a different expectation in her mind of how I should be talking about this. And she got really angry. And ultimately, the way that I handled it is I just said, ma'am, I can't help you. Our conversation's over. This isn't the type of relationship that I have with students. I look to have healthy and harmonious relationships, and I'm unable to help you as long as your mind is angry like this. And of course, she got up and stormed out of the temple. Okay, that's her choice, right? Well, I didn't feel any guilt or shame about that. I didn't feel anything whatsoever. There was no feelings in my mind whatsoever, because I knew that I was practicing right speech. I knew that I was practicing generosity by sharing the teachings. I was practicing loving kindness and compassion to help this student with the question that they asked. So if you practice these teachings and you know the natural law of karma, and you know that this student, that they cause their own anger, your mind's protected. You won't experience any guilt and shame. But in the situation that you describe, where you've gone out, or not you, but somebody has gone out and, beat someone up and they're now paralyzed, of course, that person could feel guilt and shame, because they're not training their mind. They have craving, desire, attachment. They've made unwise decisions related to their moral conduct. So the Buddha is teaching you how to eliminate your craving and clinging to protect your mind, so you're not experiencing discontentedness, but he's also teaching you wise decision-making of how to not cause harm. So you're not just going out in the world causing harm to people and then trying to eliminate your guilt and shame because of that. You're choosing to start treating people better and better through your moral conduct, while at the same time cleaning up your mind and getting rid of any discontent feelings, because that guilt and shame doesn't have a purpose. You mentioned that, there must be some purpose. It's there to teach me something. Okay, well, if you'd like to think of it that way, what it's teaching you is that your mind is still unenlightened. There's still craving, desire, attachment in your mind, but you don't need that guilt and shame to realize that you've done something unwise, right? If you've done something unwise, you can have the wisdom to understand that and make improvements in your life without the guilt and the shame. The guilt and the shame isn't helping you or benefiting you at all. So let's just take a lighter example. Let's just say, let's just say somebody broke somebody's mailbox in their neighborhood, and now they go to work and they feel so guilty and so shameful about this. And it was an accident, of course, right? That they broke this person's mailbox. Well, you don't need the guilt and the shame to realize, oh my gosh, I should pay more attention to my bodily movements. And yeah, I didn't do this well, and now let me talk to the neighbor, let me make amends here, let me get them a new mailbox, let me make sure that they're taken care of. So you don't need the guilt and the shame to realize that, hey, I need to make some wise decisions here about improving the way that I move about the world, and I need to make some wise decisions to resolve this with the neighbor so that they aren't harmed by my actions and that their mailbox can be replaced. So the guilt and the shame serves no purpose whatsoever. And that's why you can eliminate it and you'll experience a peaceful and joyful life.
Hello. Teacher David, a question, and this is kind of a double whammy maybe. Say I make a decision to go to a housewarming party, and as it approaches, I really don't feel like going to this party, and it's making me want to change that decision. Am I clinging to the feelings at this point? It would probably be proper to go, even though I don't necessarily feel like going and socializing with these people, which is the case a lot of times. But am I clinging to that? And I don't necessarily know what specific feeling, but am I clinging to that feeling to change that decision that I've made to go to this thing?
The main thing you're clinging to is decision in that situation. Because if you change your decision, then you would experience something completely different. So that's the main thing you're clinging to in that situation. If you're clinging to the feeling, it's like, okay, once you've made your decision, now when you choose not to go, if you feel guilty and shameful, now you're clinging to wanting to maybe be perceived by this person in a certain way. And now you can be clinging to that feeling of guilt and shame, and your mind just can't let it go. But initially, it's the decision that you're clinging to. And if you just let that go and be like, hey, this isn't permanent. I told them I was going to come 3 months ago, but I've changed my mind, and that's okay. Right? People around you are going to make you think that you've done something grossly wrong by choosing to change your decision. But that's not true. You need to be able to see true reality. That's what the Buddha teaches you, is that while other people may have a certain perspective of what's going on in your life and how you're making decisions, you need to be able to see true reality, that there is no harm in changing a decision. You haven't caused harm to someone's physical body. You haven't caused harm to their material possessions. You haven't caused harm to their reputation. All you've done is change a decision. Now, here's a situation that's a little bit of a spin on this, right? When I had my first wedding, I invited a bunch of people, right? And one of the people that I invited was my boss. And my boss said, yeah, I'll be there. Me and my girlfriend are going to come, put us on the list, blah, 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 right? So we put them on the list, and it was a catered event, so it was a certain amount of money that we were paying for each individual person. And the day of the wedding, I got a message that he said, hey, I'm not going to be able to come. And I knew the reason why, even though he never told me, but he had a girlfriend, that he had a new girlfriend, and he was having a lot of issues with this girlfriend. And I'm sure that's probably what it was, even though I don't know 100%. So I wouldn't cling to that perception, right? But that's what I think occurred. But nonetheless, what he did, because he understood the natural laws to a certain degree, is he gave me the money for the meals. And because he knew in that situation that he had caused harm to someone's material possessions, right? That we had put money out because he had agreed to be there and then he didn't come. So in those kinds of situations, if you agreed to come to like a housewarming party and now they're purchasing things for your arrival there, and now you're canceling the day of or the day before, that's where you would be wise to make sure that they're not harmed, that you haven't caused harm to material possessions. So that's why you need to be able to look at this this, that it's not black and white. You need to be able to look at this. So let's just say I told them a year before that I was going to go to their housewarming party. And then let's just say 6 months before I changed my mind and now I said, hey, I'm not coming to the housewarming party, or I'm not coming to your wedding. You haven't caused any harm in that situation, because now they have 6 months to make sure that they're not ordering you food, right? So that's why you have to look at each one of these situations and decide, have I caused any harm here? And do I need to make any amends here? But you can change your decisions. There's no harm in changing your decisions, but the people around you, if they're craving and clinging, they'll try to put pressure on you to not make those decisions differently, because they really want you to come to their housewarming party. But if you're not interested, then you just don't go. It's best to do that rather than drag yourself to an event. And that's what you would do if you're not clinging to your decisions. And I understand, though, the way I'm teaching you guys is different than maybe the way you think right now and the way you function right now and the way that all the people around you function right now. But this better way of life that the Buddha is teaching you is not something you're familiar with right now. And you need to be able to see what I'm describing and understand and reflect, like, yes, I have not caused harm. I have not caused harm to anyone's physical body, to their material possessions, to their reputation. And if this friend gets angry at you for not coming to their housewarming party and they choose to never associate with you ever again, you've just accomplished something very wonderful, because you've learned that this person will only be your friend if you do things their way. And you're not interested in those kinds of relationships, because those kind of relationships are based in selfishness. There's craving and clinging there. And this person will never be a true friend if they continue to keep that in their mind, that they will only be your friend if you do things their way. Those aren't the kind of relationships that you'd like to be in. So one of the things that people end up doing is, as they're getting on this path to enlightenment and they start making decisions differently, oftentimes the relationships start to shift. That there are certain people that were in your life prior to this path, that those relationships start to end. And then you start to make new relationships with individuals who are now practicing true love, where they love you as they are, as you are. They're not putting expectations on you. They're not trying to control you to do things their way. So you might notice that some of your relationships start to shift. And this is actually a really good thing, because you're going to start having relationships where people aren't putting expectations on you and trying to control you. And now you're going to have feel so free in these situations. Mm-hmm. Right now, you might have friends and family that are putting expectations on you and trying to control you to do things their way. And they can only be your friend or associate with you if you do things their way. And now you feel locked and stuck, and you'll drag yourself to that housewarming party and feel miserable the whole time you're there, when in reality, you'd much rather be somewhere else. But you can get free of that by just making different decisions. Mm-hmm. Yep.
So I've had teachings on the 5 aggregates before. They're always a little bit different, right? It was also mentioned the term ego in this context. I'm wondering if this clinging to the 5 aggregates, if you would call that ego. That's kind of how I'm trying to connect that to the other teachings I've had. But if that comes in here at all to you, like, I'd like to know your perspective.
Yeah, clinging to the 5 aggregates isn't the ego. The ego is the fetters, the personal existence view, which is the first fetter, and the 8th fetter, which is conceit. That's what we refer to as the ego, because the word ego didn't exist during the lifetime of the Buddha. So he didn't use that. And it's wonderful that he didn't, because this personal existence view and this conceit actually are completely different. The symptoms are different. What it is different. The way to resolve it is different. So it's actually good that he did split it out. But we're combining these things and calling it the ego. Where someone might be talking about the ego is here in the consciousness. The mind can cling to that identity, that personal existence view, which is a portion of the ego, but it's not the entire ego. So when I talk about the ego, it's personal existence view and conceit, and it's not really related to the aggregates. Mm-hmm. Okay. So don't see any other questions anywhere. All right. So let's go on to the 6 sense bases. Well, actually, I have a little bit more here on the aggregates to teach you guys first. So the reason why you would like to learn about these 5 aggregates, I already mentioned this, is that you're going to need to understand how to identify a living being in order to be able to practice the first precept. You're not going to be able to practice the first precept if you don't understand how to identify a living being. So that's one reason why you would need to understand the 5 aggregates, because by understanding how to practice loving kindness and compassion for all living beings, you'll actually be able to eliminate this ill will. Ill will is one of the fetters in the mind, the anger, the hatred, the ill will, the frustration, the agitation, the annoyance, and all of that. You wouldn't be able to eliminate that without understanding the 5 aggregates. Also, it helps you to understand how to eliminate clinging to the 5 aggregates, because the mind will cling and you'll experience discontentedness, but also those 2 fetters of desire for form and desire for formless. We haven't really talked about that in this retreat. I'll explain to you guys what those are. What the mind can do, and part of its pollutions, is you can cling to this existence and wanting this existence to be permanent. And now as you're getting closer and closer to death, you are very uncomfortable and it's very painful. Getting close to death doesn't have to be painful. You don't have to experience painful feelings as you get close to death. But if you're clinging to this life, wanting this life to be permanent, as you get close to death, it'll be very painful for you. Or something that some people have is they'll have a craving for another existence. Maybe maybe they don't like this current existence as a human being and they want to be in a different family, or they want to be in a different situation. That can be desire for form, where you're desiring to be in this physical form or another physical form, like an animal or another human being. At one time, I was really interested in being a bird. I thought it'd be wonderful to be a bird, right? Fly around in the sky, be checking people out, like, wow, look at that down there. That'd look really cool, right? So that would be desire for form. So you need to get to the point where you don't have this clinging or this craving or this desire to be in this form world, in the human form or in an animal existence. Because as long as you're clinging for existence, when you get close to the end of this existence, you won't want to experience that impermanence. Your mind will be experiencing painful feelings. So you need to get to the point where you're not craving existence, but you're also not craving non-existence either, right? So sometimes when people say, well, if I'm not craving existence, doesn't that mean that I wouldn't want to be here? No, that's the other side. The Buddha is teaching you to come into the middle, where you're content and peaceful and joyful in your current existence, where your mind is completely content and peaceful. So in order to do that, you need to get to the point where you're not craving existence for this existence to be permanent, but you're also not craving non-existence, where you'd want to kill yourself as well, right? So you're not interested in either of those two extremes. But the middle for this is to be peaceful and joyful in the present moment in your current existence. So eliminating desire for form means that you need to eliminate the clinging to all of these 5 aggregates. And by the time you do this, you'll get to the point where you don't even have fear of death. Sometimes people have fear of death. By the time you get to enlightenment, you won't even have the fear of death, right? The individual who's enlightened, they don't have any fear of death. They understand that this existence is impermanent and that it is not permanent, and their mind is already peaceful and joyful in the present moment, and they're not craving for this existence to be permanent because they understand it's impermanent. And then there's also a desire for formless. Desire for formless would be a desire, a craving to exist in one of the formless realms, like hell, afflicted spirits, which are ghosts, or heavenly realm. It's more common for people to have a desire to exist in the heavenly realm, but there are some people in the world that have a desire to be in hell, right? There are some people that are like that. Very rare, but it does happen. So if you have a desire to exist in one of the formless realms, then the mind is not yet content in the present moment. This is very common in cultures that are teaching Christianity or Muslim teachings or even Hindu teachings, that there's this desire to be in heaven. That people think that heaven is a permanent existence and the ultimate goal is to be a really good person in this life, and then you're going to be judged and you're either going to go to a good place or a bad place. And now there might be this longing, yearning to be in heaven permanently with God. And this isn't true. You can see everything around you is impermanent and constantly changing. The heavenly realm is not permanent, because you can see the universal truth of impermanence all around you. But if you're in the current existence as a human being and you're craving for existence in the heavenly realm with God or any of these other realms, that means you're not content in the present moment. You're longing, yearning for something that you don't have. That's what the unenlightened mind does with craving and clinging, is that the mind always thinks the grass is greener on the other side. It always wants something that it doesn't have. So if you're in the present moment with a desire to be in heaven, then you're not content in the present moment. And in order to get to the point where your mind's completely peaceful and joyful in the present moment, you need to not have that longing, yearning to be in one of those formless realms of heaven, afflicted spirits, or hell. And then the same thing, you need to get to the point where there's not a desire for continued existence in the human realm or in the animal realm. That's what desire for form and desire for formless is. So by understanding the 5 aggregates, you can train your mind to eliminate its clinging, wanting this existence to be permanent. But you would also eliminate any craving for non-existence either. You need to get to the point where in the present moment, you're completely peaceful and joyful. So that's where the 5 aggregates will help you with that. I put together this little diagram at one point to be able to help people, because I think sometimes images help people to understand what things are. So there's this physical body, which is the physical form. And then inside the mind, there's feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and then the consciousness itself. And these two things are coming together, and we're calling this the person. So there's the body, the mind, and the combination of these two things is the person. You might hear some people call this the observer. Some people refer to it that way, but the Buddha referred to it as the person, right? There's the body, there's the mind, and the combination of these two things is the person, right? But you're not even interested in allowing your mind to adopt that identity. So these are the 5 aggregates coming together to create the person, okay? All right, so now we'll talk about the 6 sense bases. The 6 sense bases are what the mind's doing when we talk about longing, yearning, when we talk about craving, desire, attachment. The mind has sensual desire. This is a fetter or a pollution in the mind where the mind's longing, yearning through the 6 sense bases. This is craving, desire, attachment. We call these the doorways to discontentedness. That anytime you experience any discontentedness, it's going to come through one of these doorways. The doorways are the internal sense bases, which are the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, the body, and then the mind itself. These are all the sense bases. These are called the 6 sense bases. And anytime you experience any discontentedness, whether it's pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, it's because there's contact coming through one of these 6 sense bases. And what is coming in contact with is what's called the external sense bases. The eyes are going to see a form, a physical form. The ears are going to hear a sound. The nose is going to smell an odor. The tongue is going to taste a flavor. The physical body is going to come in contact with the physical object. And then the mind is going to experience a mental object. So it's these doorways that is having contact that now you experience discontentedness because of the mind's central desire. I'm going to explain to you this in more detail, but first let me explain to you why it's important to learn these. That it helps you to understand how discontentedness enters into the mind so that you can develop right mindfulness and you can actually guard the mind. So that you can protect your own contentedness. The Buddha talks about this as guarding the doorways and protecting your own contentedness. Because when you start to understand what these 6 sense bases are and how it produces discontentedness in the mind, you can start guarding these doorways. And I'm going to give you some examples of these. It helps you to understand this fetter of central desire so that you can actually eliminate it out of the mind. Okay, so now I'm going to help you to understand this more fully, and I'm going to give you examples of these. So we've got the eyes that come in contact with a physical form. We have the ears that come in contact with a sound. We have a nose that comes in contact with odors. We have a tongue that comes in contact with flavors. We have a physical body that comes in contact with physical objects. And then we have a mind that comes in contact with mental objects. So starting with the eyes, because of sensual desire, The mind is longing, yearning for permanently agreeable contact through the eyes. And when it has agreeable contact, it experiences conditioned pleasant feelings like happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria. But when it experiences disagreeable contact through the eyes, when it sees a physical form that is disagreeable, it triggers that central desire, that craving, desire, attachment, and now it experiences painful feelings like anger, sadness, frustration, and others. So here's an example. Say you were walking down the street and you saw a young child holding the hand of its parent. And you're like, oh my gosh, that's so beautiful. Look at that little 4-year-old child holding its parents' hands and walking down the street. Oh, that's so touching. That's so warming. Oh, they're walking across the street together and they're holding hands. Oh, that's so beautiful, right? That's agreeable to the mind that it's seeing through the eyes a physical form that it sees to be agreeable. And now it gets a conditioned, pleasant feeling of happiness or excitement. But now you turn the corner and you walk down the block and you see a parent slap their child across the face. Oh my gosh. Now this is disagreeable. You're seeing a physical form where someone's slapping a child across the face. We're not talking about what's wise or unwise here, because obviously what the Buddha teaches is that it's unwise to cause harm to anybody. That's not what we're talking about. We're just talking about what's causing your mind to be discontent. Well, when you see that person slap the child across the face, your eyes are seeing a physical form that your mind, your sensual desire, considers to be disagreeable. The mind is craving permanently agreeable contact while you live in an impermanent world. You're not going to see things that are permanently agreeable to you. It's not possible. You live in an impermanent world. You're going to sometimes see things that you agree with, and you're going to sometimes see things that you disagree with. But if you can only be happy when you're experiencing things that you agree with, then that means your happiness is limited. You need to be able to understand impermanence, right? So you're going to see things that are agreeable to you, and then you're going to see things that are disagreeable to you. And now there's going to be conditioned feelings. That's what the unenlightened mind experiences. By the time you get to enlightenment, you're beyond this. And we're going to talk about that in a moment. I'm going to go through all of these first, and I'm going to talk about getting beyond this. Okay. So now another example of the ears. You hear something. Okay. So now you're at a stoplight. Somebody pulls up to you with some music, maybe some hip hop or some rap, or I don't know what you listen to, heavy metal, or I don't know what it is, right? You're like, man, that's my jam. All right, let's go. Come on. And you're all dancing in your seat. You're so excited because you're hearing a sound that is agreeable to you. And your sensual desire is like, all right, yeah, that's my jam, right? But now you pull up to another light, and now someone pulls up to you with some other type of music, and you're hearing a sound that is disagreeable to you. You don't listen to this kind of music. And now, because of your sensual desire, you get frustrated and angry and irritable. That's because of your sensual desire. You're hearing a sound through the ear that your mind considers to be disagreeable to you. Then the nose, a certain odor, right? Maybe you're walking down the street, you walk past a flower shop, and you smell the flowers coming out. It's like, oh my gosh, that is such an amazing smell. I can stand here all day long and smell that. Oh my gosh, that's so wonderful. But now you walk a few more steps and you get a whiff of the sewer and you're repulsed by it. Oh my gosh. That's because of sensual desire. The mind is experiencing contact through the nose, that there's a nose, there's an odor, and now the mind is aware of that. And because of its sensual desire, it sees the flower shop as being agreeable and you get pleasant feelings. But then when you experience the odor of the sewer, you see that as disagreeable. When in reality, all this is impermanence, that you're going to sometimes smell flowers and you're sometimes going to smell the sewer. It's just impermanence. That's all it is. But if every time you smell something like the sewer, you're repulsed by it and you get angry, then you're not going to be able to be permanently happy and permanently joyful. You just need to understand it's an impermanent situation. Just keep walking, right? That's all you got to do, right? Or maybe you're in the mall, you're walking behind somebody that has some amazing cologne or perfume on. You're like, oh my gosh, that's so amazing. But now maybe you go into the bathroom and they haven't cleaned the bathroom at the mall, and you get this smell of urine or feces or something like this, and you're repulsed by it, right? That's just an impermanent situation. That's all that is, right? You don't have to experience a certain feeling because of it. It's just impermanence. That's all it is. Okay. So now there's the tongue. There's certain flavors that touch the tongue, right? Now, when you're experiencing these flavors, like maybe chocolate cake, you eat the chocolate cake and you get so happy and excited about this chocolate cake that you're eating, and you're getting all these pleasant feelings. And you go to this restaurant maybe once a week, and every time you go, you taste this chocolate cake and wow, it tastes so wonderful, right? But now let's just maybe say on the 3rd or 6th week, you go into this restaurant and maybe their employees changed and they have a new employee who's baking that chocolate cake. And now you taste the chocolate cake and it's a different type of flavor and you're repulsed by it. This is because the mind's craving that permanently agreeable flavor coming through the tongue. And now because there was a different recipe, a different person made it, it tastes different and you're repulsed by it. So there's probably certain foods right now that you're attracted to because it has a certain flavor. And then there's other foods that you're not attracted to and you're repulsed by those and you're pushing those away. You're going to need to learn how to just look at food as something to sustain the health of the body, that it's not to please the tongue and please the mind. But that's what the unenlightened mind is going to do, is it's going to be gravitating and attracted towards these foods that you find to be agreeable, and you're going to push away with aversion these foods that you think are disagreeable to you. So I'm starting to incorporate how to overcome this into my little talk here. The way to overcome this is that you need to expose your mind to all of these different things, all these different flavors. You will never get to enlightenment by pushing away foods that you find to be disagreeable, because you're just going to allow that craving to exist in the mind. So there's going to be certain things that you're going to need to taste that right now you see as disagreeable. I had this with durian. I don't know if you guys are familiar with durian. In my opinion, it smells like poop. And I've never had poop in my mouth before, but if I did, I think it'd be just like this fruit, right? It's like the consistency of the fruit. It's just almost like poop to me, right? So when I first started being around durian, I was repulsed by it. I didn't want to be around it. And the first time I ever put it in my mouth, I was like, oh my gosh, that's the consistency of poop, right? So I was away from durian for as long as I could. But then when I started understanding these teachings, I was like, all right, I'm going to have to eat this durian fruit. So what I did is I started eating durian inside of something else, because obviously I like cake and I like cookies, right? So I started eating durian fruit inside of cake. It was durian cake, right? And I was like, wow, this is actually good. And I was like actually eating the durian cake. And I did that for quite a while, many months. And I ate durian cake. The odor wasn't quite as strong. The consistency wasn't the same because it was in a cake. So now my mind was getting a little bit more acclimated to it, right? And then eventually I started eating the durian fruit again, right? And now I can eat durian fruit and I'm not repulsed by it, right? So you're going to need to expose your mind to these types of things. We're going to talk about that a little bit more here in a moment. So there's the tongue. Then there's the mind. Then there's the physical body. Okay, so the physical body can have certain things that it sees to be agreeable or disagreeable. Let's just say there's a certain fabric that you put on, maybe silk or something like that, and you feel really comfortable and you feel really great when you have this silk. Or maybe a certain type of towel that you dry off with in the morning, and it feels really great on the body, and you get all these pleasant feelings when you have that fabric touching the body. But then if you have wool, or if you have a different type of towel at a hotel that you're drying off with, maybe you're repulsed by it and you're discontent by it. This is because of your sensual desire. The mind is longing, yearning through the body for permanently agreeable contact with physical objects that's touching the body. Here's another example. Say you're walking down the street and you're feeling so great, but then all of a sudden somebody bumps into you, right? You might see that as being disagreeable. And now your mind experiences anger or frustration as someone bumped into the body. Instead of just realizing this is an impermanent situation, I can just keep on walking, right? But oftentimes there's anger that comes up, the ego comes up, and you've got all kinds of issues to deal with. And now you might even become unskillful in that situation. You can start fighting or arguing with this person or something like that. But instead, you can just see it as an impermanent situation and just keep walking, No big deal, right? Then there's the mind itself. The mind in the present moment can be thinking about things in the past that were either pleasant or painful, and now it can form feelings in the present moment about those things. Maybe you had a certain boyfriend or girlfriend that treated you really well in the past, and now in the present moment, you're longing, yearning to be with that person. Or maybe you were really rich and wealthy in the past, and you could afford certain things in the past. And maybe in the present moment, you can't afford those things anymore, and now you're longing, yearning for those things. So in the present moment, you can either experience pleasant feelings by thinking about certain things that happened in the past, or you can experience painful feelings. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, the ears, the nose, the tongue, or the body. It's just the mind thinking about that thing in the past, and now you're forming feelings on it right now in the present moment based on things in the past. And the mind can do the same thing about the future. You could be thinking about the future, and now you're forming certain feelings now. Like just say 2 weeks from now, you have a presentation at work where you're going to be presenting some work to 30 different people. And maybe this is upper management at your company, and you've got to present this to them. And now for the next 2 weeks, you've got all this stress and anxiety in your mind. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, body, or the mind. You're just sitting at home in your living room thinking about the idea of being in front of 30 people in upper management, and now you have this stress and anxiety. This is your central desire, mind's longing, yearning. Or also there can be the pleasant side of that, right? Maybe you're sitting at home thinking about your trip to Thailand 6 months from now, and now you're getting all these excited feelings. There hasn't been any contact through the eyes, ears, nose, tongue, or the body. It's just the mind thinking about something in the future, and now in the present moment you're having pleasant feelings. So these are the 6 sense bases, and how central desire is causing you to experience discontentedness. It's always going to come through these doorways. These doorways is what's allowing the discontentedness to be formed, because there's central desire in your mind, and now you're experiencing some contact. Okay, so I'm going to give you an example why this is so important for you. At one point, I was eliminating caffeine out of my practice. I used to drink a lot of coffee, and in fact, probably if you really ask me, that's probably one of the reasons why I moved here to Thailand, because there's coffee on pretty much every street corner, and I used to drink about 3, 4, or 5 big iced coffees a day, and boy, did it taste good, right? All that milky flavor, and then you get that caffeine kick. So I used to drink a lot of coffee, and I realized that, hey, I needed to get rid of this, that it was causing my mind to be overactive. It was causing me difficulty sleeping, all kinds of things like this. My energy would spike, and then I would drop off. So I needed to get rid of this caffeine. So I started gradually moving away from this caffeine. And I got to a point where eventually I was away from it for 8 weeks, right? And I was like, wow, look at me. I'm away from this coffee for 8 weeks. I was feeling so conceited. I was like, man, I'm getting rid of these attachments. I'm going to get to enlightenment. Look at me, right? I was so excited about this. And I was walking down the street, and I turned the corner, and I got a whiff of coffee coming out of a coffee shop. And I was right in line in the coffee shop, waiting behind 2 or 3 people. And I'm standing there the whole time saying, why are you doing this to yourself? You've been away from this stuff for 8 weeks. What are you doing? What are you doing? And I was just talking to myself. I was like, you're going to regret this. Why are you doing this? And I was trying to talk myself out of it, but the craving was just too strong. And I got up to the front of the line. I was like, iced coffee, please. Right? And I got my iced coffee, sat down. I drank about 1/3 of it or about 1/2 of it. And eventually I was like, forget it. I'm done with this coffee. I threw it away, and I've never had a coffee since. Right? But nonetheless, later that night, when I was at home, before I was starting to meditate, I started looking over my day, and I was like, what happened today? What do I need to improve? And when I looked at my day, I was like, man, I was doing so well with that coffee craving. What happened here? And I started thinking about the 6 sense bases. And I was like, what happened? I wasn't guarding my mind. I didn't have mindfulness. I wasn't guarding my mind. Which doorway did I have contact through that arose that craving? I was like, the nose. I got that odor of the coffee, and that's what took me into the coffee shop. If it wasn't for that odor coming into the nose and my sensual desire getting triggered, I would have never been in that coffee shop. So now I put together a plan for myself. I was like, all right, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to do what the Buddha teaches, which is I'm going to guard the doorways to discontentedness, because the doorways are the eyes, ears, nose, the tongue, the body, and the mind. So now when I walk down the street for a period of time, I was guarding my doorways. I would look ahead and see if there's any coffee shops anywhere. And if there was a coffee shop, I would switch to the other side of the street. I had to do this for about 3 months or 6 months, just until I got rid of the craving. Now I can go into a coffee shop and I can sit down and smell coffee all day long, and I have no interest in buying a coffee or drinking a coffee. But for about 3 to 6 months, I needed to really guard that doorway of the nose so that I would look ahead and see, are there any coffee shops, so that I could switch to the other side of the street. This was practicing right mindfulness from the Eightfold Path, and it was practicing right effort, applying effort to eliminate the unwholesome and arise the wholesome. And now after 3 to 6 months of doing that, now, like I said, I can go into a coffee shop and I can smell coffee all day long, and I would never take a sip of it, right? So that's why these 6 sense bases are so helpful for you, because you're going to hear me teach in a minute how to identify your cravings, desires, attachments. And if you know which doorway that you're experiencing contact, you can guard that doorway, just like I guarded the doorway in this situation. So do you guys have any questions on the 6 sense bases?
Yeah. The temples are just top to bottom pleasant stimulation, from incense, flowers, that kind of, they're beautiful. And kind of a little bit of what you're saying about an attachment to whether it's beautiful or not beautiful, or, you know, like, I guess, why are the temples a bombardment of pleasurable senses, from the sights, the sparkles, everything in the temples is what you might put in that pleasurable. So how it, you know, you don't need to, you know, guarding your doors, you know, why is the temples so pleasant when this path is kind of like placing a neutrality, I guess, or a non-attachment to pleasure versus, you know, the sewer water versus the flowers, they're senses, you know,
Okay.
but we don't offer those kind of what we would label unpleasant to the altar or in those sacred places.
Yeah. So you consider the temples to be beautiful, right? But there's going to be other people in the world who consider them to be gaudy and ugly. The reason why you consider them to be beautiful is because of the central desire that you have in your mind. You see these physical forms and you see that to be agreeable, but somebody else could look at it and see it to be disagreeable. And that's impermanence. Everybody's going to look at that differently. So the Thais aren't making their temples look any particular way in order to, you know, make them look a certain way in order for you to think that they're pleasant. Of course, I think that they look nice, but that's just what your mind is thinking, is that because of the central desire in your mind, you're looking at it as being pleasurable, where somebody else could look at it as being disagreeable to them. So it's not that the Thai people are tapping into your mind to figure out what you might like and then constructing their temples that way. They're just constructing their temples the way that they would like to construct them. And then different people are going to see them and view them in different ways based on their own central desires, if they have central desire. Okay. Yep. Another question.
So I understand what you were saying about exposing yourselves to sights, smells, things that are unpleasurable to you. Is it still wholesome to enjoy a delicious meal, a beautiful song, a beautiful painting? Like, is that unwholesome to have that enjoyment as long as you don't think you're like craving it and recognize that it is impermanent and may not be there?
Yeah, that's the beauty of getting to the point where your mind doesn't have sensual desire, is that you're not longing, yearning for it, forming conditioned feelings, but instead, when you come to the middle, you'll be able to enjoy something without clinging to it. And that mind needs to learn how to do that, because in the unenlightened mind with craving and clinging, it can only enjoy it if you're getting those conditioned pleasant feelings. So what the mind needs to be taught and trained how to do is to not have craving, desire, attachment, not get conditioned pleasant feelings, but also not swing to the other side where you could care less, but instead come to the middle where you can enjoy that piece of chocolate cake without clinging and craving to it. So in the unenlightened state, let's just say you go to the store or you go to the restaurant and they have the chocolate cake and you get so excited about the chocolate cake, you get all these pleasant feelings, and each time you go, you get so happy and excited that it's there. But then if you allow your mind to do that, that means the day that you show up and they don't have your chocolate cake, you're going to get angry, frustrated, and annoyed, right? And now you might become unskillful with the people in the restaurant through your moral conduct. But what you would like to get to is where you're practicing the middle way, where you go to the restaurant and it's like, hey, I'd like to order that chocolate cake. And they bring it to you and you're like, oh, sweet. Now you enjoy it. You know that it tastes good and you enjoy it. But then when it's over with, it's over with. And now when you come back the next day and they don't have your chocolate cake, you're like, all right, no worries. I don't need dessert today. Or maybe I'll order some fruit. Or do you have apple pie? Right? Maybe you just switch and you're not upset or frustrated. So that's what the mind's ultimately going to be able to do when you get rid of sensual desire, is to enjoy something without clinging to it and craving for it to be permanent. And this is the middle way that oftentimes people have difficulties to see, but the mind can be trained to be able to do this. So even now, if I went to a fruit stand, I can eat any fruit that's on the fruit stand. But if there was bananas, apples, oranges, and durian, I'm going to pick the probably bananas, apples, or oranges because I have a preference for that. But I can eat the durian, right? And I can eat it, and I know that it's here to sustain the body, and I've eaten it many times, but I have a preference, and I like the flavor of all of these. I can eat any one of them, but I prefer the bananas or the apples or the oranges or the mangoes or whatever. I would eat those prior to the durian. So you'll get to that point, but you need to be able to really look at this closely and make sure that your mind isn't tricking you, because the mind can kind of trick you and be like, oh, this is just a preference. I'm not going to eat that durian fruit. But you need to put your mind in that situation enough times that you can see that you're truly content and peaceful eating that durian. You're not averse to it, but now you're just choosing to eat the bananas instead or the mangoes instead. And then you can enjoy that, while you could also enjoy the durian too, but you just prefer these bananas and so forth. Mm-hmm. Yep.
Just want to make sure my understanding is correct, because you called the 6 sense bases the doorways to discontentedness or of discontentedness. That's not the only thing the doorway is for, right? Because like it makes it almost sound a little bit like, oh, everything that comes through those doorways is bad or is not helpful for me.
Mm-hmm.
But it's also the doorway for the information I get about the world, which will be useful for me to use to make wise decisions, right?
Yeah, exactly. So it's just understanding that anytime the mind is discontent, whether it's pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, it's going to be from contact through these 6 sense bases, right? There's no harm in having these 6 sense bases. It's just understanding that, yeah, when your mind's discontent, you can actually trace it down to exactly what doorway is being experiencing contact, because then you can guard that doorway. So for example, you guys, some of you heard me tell the story about how I had to extinguish my unwholesome karma with my wife, when my wife would be bitter and harsh and hostile to me. Well, what I would do initially is I would just protect my doorways, is I would just walk away. Right? Because I was seeing her get angry. I was hearing her get angry, right? I was having this contact through the eyes and the ears. And the way to ensure that my anger wouldn't come up as I was training my mind during that period is I would just walk away. And that's protecting your doorways. And if you understand that, then you'll start making wiser decisions about how to get rid of these cravings, desires, attachments. But then ultimately I got to a point where I had control over the mind, that I could sit there and I could look right at her, and I could experience this and not get angry and get frustrated. But in the beginning part, I had to step away.
Maybe a little analogy or an attempt at an analogy. As long as I don't have a good bouncer that shows away everything that I don't want, I should maybe just shut some of the doors for a little while and, don't remove myself from that situation, right?
I think the way that the Buddha describes it, where he calls the 6 sense bases the doorways to discontentedness, that's an appropriate way to refer to it. We can understand that all discontentedness comes through these 6 sense bases without labeling it as good or bad, right? That's what the unenlightened mind does, is it labels things as good or bad, right or wrong. By the time you're experiencing enlightenment, you won't think of things in that way. It's just that, yes, these are the doorways. This is what discontentedness you experience through that. But that's not to say that you shouldn't look at things, you shouldn't smell things or hear things. It's just that anytime you're discontent, it's going to come through one of those doorways. And that's just a truth that you can independently verify. Mm-hmm.
I just had a question actually about the 5 aggregates.
Mm-hmm.
Asking about that. All living beings, sentient beings.
Mm-hmm.
I understand you said it. It applies to all. These are all sentient beings. Every being that has perception, feeling. But it seems a bit like some of this is sort of almost exclusively human or for our mind. It seems so deep.
Mm-hmm.
Some of these aggregates that we're talking about. I'm trying to relate this to a mosquito, for example.
Mosquito has all 5 aggregates too.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I guess so. I guess the word also that it's just such a complicated word, and I'm not asking you to answer it now. It's just word consciousness, because it's, to me, it has a lot to do with, mental thinking,
Mm-hmm.
consciousness, whereas I don't think mosquitoes think. That's why I have but they perceive, and I guess that's consciousness too.
They have a mind. Yeah. They make their own free will choices. They have all 5 aggregates: form, feelings, perceptions, volitional formations, and a consciousness. Mm-hmm. Okay. All right. So now, just like the 5 aggregates, I created this little diagram to hopefully help you to be able to see what's going on here, that there's this mind, right? And then there's this craving and longing, yearning that the mind has. And now that craving, that longing, yearning, that central desire is now coming through these eyes, ears, nose, tongue, the body, and then there's the mind itself, that the mind is longing, yearning through these sense bases for physical objects, or I've got it up here, form, sounds, odors, flavors, and physical objects. Right? So if this diagram helps you to be able to see what's going on here, then wonderful. And if it doesn't, just forget that I showed it to you. Okay, but this is the mind longing, yearning through these 6 sense bases for the contact with these things. Okay. All right. So now we can talk about what's called the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape, because this is something that you need as part of getting to the first stage of enlightenment. So the Buddha calls this here the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape. You need to be able to understand this. So the cause of your discontentedness is craving, desire, attachment. The mind has that longing, yearning. The disappearance is that whatever the mind is craving, it's going to disappear. It is not permanent, but the mind is craving and longing, yearning for it to be permanent. So you need to understand that all those things that you see, that you hear, that you smell, that come in contact with the tongue, anything that comes in contact with the body, or any thoughts or ideas that go through the mind, it's all impermanent, right? It's not permanent. That's the disappearance. I have what you need inside the office right there. Yeah, you're welcome to get it if you like. It's sitting on the sofa. Yep. So the disappearance is it's this room right here. This room right here. Yeah. The disappearance is that whatever your mind's craving, it's going to disappear. And you need to be able to teach your mind this, because as your mind's sitting there longing, yearning, when you're seeing that handsome man and you're seeing that beautiful woman, you're just like, oh, I just want to get that so bad. Well, that's impermanent. The relationship's impermanent, the physical form's impermanent. Or when you're looking at that beautiful car and you just can't wait to get that beautiful car, right? Well, okay, maybe you choose to get that beautiful car because you enjoy it and that's what you need as transportation, but you need to remind yourself it's impermanent. It's going to slowly deteriorate. The paint's going to fade. Tires are going to need to be changed. The upholstery is going to get ripped and torn. It's not permanent. So you might still choose to get that car, but just understand it is impermanent. That will help you to train the mind to not crave and cling. But there's this gratification in the mind. The unenlightened mind's central desire is looking for this gratification, that it's longing, yearning for those objects, and it wants this gratification. It wants those pleasant feelings. That's why it's longing, yearning. Then there's a danger in this. The danger is that the mind's going to experience discontentedness, that it's going to experience conditioned feelings, that the mind's going to go up and down and up and down. That's the danger, the discontentedness. But then there's an escape. The escape is the Eightfold Path. This is where the mind needs to be restrained through the Eightfold Path. And as you do this, and you're train the mind to be restrained, eventually when you don't have craving, desire, attachment in your mind anymore, your mind won't need to be restrained, because you can just go through life and you can enjoy that chocolate cake. You can enjoy driving that nice car. You can enjoy those relationships that you're in. You can enjoy it, but you're not clinging and craving to it. So when mom comes to visit you, you can enjoy the time with mom. And then when she leaves, it's like, all right, see you later, mom. Goodbye. And you don't miss her, right? You don't feel bored and lonely when she's gone, right? But if you have craving and clinging and you don't understand that mom is impermanent, and you don't understand that your mind is seeking this gratification, and you don't understand the danger that there's discontentedness, if you allow your mind to get the pleasant feelings when mom shows up at your door with the recipe that she's going to make for you, then that means when she's gone, you're going to be bored and lonely and missing her and feeling miserable. So you need to be able to understand this recipe here so that you don't allow your mind to keep doing this, because that's the cycle that the mind is stuck in. It's stuck in this cycle over and over and over again. It'll crave. It'll want things to be permanent. It'll seek this gratification. It doesn't understand there's a danger in that. And then it doesn't know the escape. That's the lack of wisdom that the mind has. But when you arise wisdom and you can see this, now you can use it to your advantage. That whenever you see your mind longing, yearning, you can restrain it. You can say, hey, look, that thing is impermanent. Yes, I need to get this car, but right now isn't the best time for me. I don't have the money. Let me restrain my mind, right? I'm not going to just get that brand new car because of this gratification, because that brand new car is not going to bring me permanent happiness. It's not possible. And there's a danger in allowing the mind to be discontent, because if you get those pleasant feelings, the painful ones are waiting for you right around the corner. If you get so happy and excited with that brand new job that you just got, with the better salary, better office, better company, well, when they go out of business or they lay you off in 5 years, you're going to be angry and frustrated. So you need to be able to learn how to go ahead and pursue that job and get that job, and know that it's going to be helpful for you to have this job and it's going to build your career. Enjoy that job while you're doing it, but just always reminding yourself that it is impermanent, that it's not permanent. At some point, this job is going to come to an end. Right? And now you just continue to enjoy doing the job, building your skills, doing all the things that you need to do at that job, but you know that it's impermanent. And the Eightfold Path is what's going to help you to be able to train your mind to get to that point where you can enjoy that job, but not cling to it and crave for it to be permanent. Okay, so this is called the cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape. Any questions on this? No questions on this? Okay. So now, let me just see 1 second. I see you guys taking a break. Maybe we should take a break sooner than later. It's 11:15. Would you guys like a break? I think we've been at it for like 2 hours and 15 minutes. Before I teach you guys this next part, let's take a break. All right. So let's take a break up to 11:30. Give you guys a chance to rest and take a break, and we'll pick it up after this. Okay. Okay, so I'm going to move on from here because now that you understand the 5 aggregates, now that you understand the 6 sense basers, or at least you've been exposed to them, right? You got some study that you need to do to be able to really deeply understand them. But now that you've been exposed to them, and now that you're starting to understand cause, disappearance, gratification, danger, and escape, we can start talking about identifying your cravings, desires, attachments, because the Eightfold Path is there for you as a generalized training that you need to dial into your life closer and closer, and you'll bring your life up to that and then live your life that way for an extended period of time. That's a generalized training that you need as a foundation. But then as you've got that well underway, you can start getting to this next piece, which is to identify your individual cravings and almost surgically go in and remove individual cravings. The way you do this is you use the discontentedness that you experience as like a red light on the dashboard of your car. If you had a car and you were driving it and there was a red light that popped on the dashboard, you would probably pull over, right? You're not going to just keep on driving with the red light on the dashboard of your car. You're probably going to pull over. And if you've got some skills, you're probably going to pop the hood and start looking under the hood and try to figure out what's going on in this car. But if you don't have any skills, then you'll probably take your car to a mechanic and ask the mechanic to take a look and give you an idea of what it would cost to fix this, right? So the same thing is true about your mind, that when you're experiencing discontentedness, whether it's conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, you can start looking inward and start investigating this. Use it as the red light on the dashboard of your car to figure out what is your cravings, desires, attachments here that's producing those conditioned feelings. That you're not going to just keep driving your car with that stress and anxiety, the frustration, the guilt, the shame, and the fear. You need to just keep plowing forward in life. You can pull over and you can look inward to try to figure out what are the cravings, desires, attachments that are producing this. And if you've got some skills, you can look inward and figure this out. But if you don't, then you take your car to the mechanic. The mechanic in this scenario is your teacher. You can take your mind to your teacher. You can say, hey, teacher, here's some things that have been happening in my life recently. I've got this discontentedness and I can't figure out what my cravings, desires, attachments are. If you do what I'm going to describe to you here, and then occasionally you might need to come talk to me, eventually you'll get the skills yourself. You won't actually need to keep coming to me. But initially you might need to come to me to be able to get some help, to be able to identify some of your cravings. But then once you build that skill, you'll be good to go. You can do this on your own. So in addition to something like meditation, that you're building that skill, you need to also build the skill and the ability to look inward, to be able to see all your own cravings, desires, attachments, because you can't be with the teacher permanently. The teacher's not permanent in your life. You need to build this wisdom to be able to do this yourself. So if you use the discontentedness as the red light on the dashboard of your car, that's alerting you, hey, you've got some cravings, desires, attachments here. You've got some things to attend to. And now once your mind has calmed down, you can start looking inward. So I'm going to share with you guys this process of how to identify your cravings and then how to surgically go in and almost remove them. But this is only taught as you've already got the Eightfold Path well underway. If you don't have the Eightfold Path well underway, it doesn't make sense to, start doing these kinds of things necessarily. You've got to get that Eightfold Path well underway. So that's why I encourage you to really take some time to really study that. And if you'd like a study guide, just reach out to me, send me a message, because I've created a study guide for the Eightfold Path and I can send it to you. And then you can actually use that study guide to study the Eightfold Path. I mean, you've got the books, you've got the videos, you've got the podcast, you've got all these kinds of things, but also I created this little study guide that will help you. So if you'd like it, just send me a message and I'll send it back to you. So once you've got the Eightfold Path well underway and you're understanding how to do that, you're meditating, you're practicing generosity, you're doing all these other things, now you can start doing this. That whenever discontentedness occurs, in the moment, cut it off and let it go. That's why you're training your mind with the breathing mindfulness meditation to cut off and let go. You're trying to cut it off and let it go as soon as possible. And the more that you develop your mindfulness, you'll be able to cut it off as a bodily sensation. that tingling sensation in the body, the tightening in the chest, the heat or the tightening in the throat, the heat in the face, the pressure in the skull. That's the bodily sensations associated with your mind's about to get angry. You're about to get frustrated. That's the early warning system that we were talking about with the Eightfold Path. That's part of the 4 foundations of mindfulness. So if you can catch it as a bodily sensation and cut it off and let it go there, that's ideal. But if you don't catch it there and it becomes a feeling, you can cut it off there. If you don't cut it off there, it's going to affect the condition of your mind for a few moments, a few hours, a few days. You're going to be agitated and grumpy and irritable. If you didn't catch it as a bodily sensation and you didn't catch it as a feeling, you need to catch it as a condition of the mind, because then it's going to feed those mental objects. So the first thing you should do whenever your mind's discontent is cut it off and let it go. You're not suppressing your feelings. You're not repressing your feelings. You're actually cutting it off and letting it go before it becomes a feeling as a bodily sensation. But if you missed it there, you can cut it off as a feeling and just clear it out of the mind. Okay? So that's what you would like to do in the moment, whether it's a conditioned pleasant feeling, a painful feeling, or a feeling that's neither painful nor pleasant. You need to be willing to eliminate the temporary pleasure in order to be able to get to the permanent happiness and the permanent joy. If you just keep holding on to the temporary pleasant feelings, you'll never get to the permanent peace and the permanent joy and the permanent happiness. Because what your mind's doing is it's forming this conditioned feeling. It sees something, it hears something, it smells something, it has some flavor on the tongue, has some kind of contact with the body, or some thought or idea goes through the mind, and now it forms a conditioned feeling based on that contact. And if you keep allowing your mind to get those conditioned pleasant feelings, which are temporary, then you're going to experience the painful feelings, and you're never going to get to the permanent unconditioned happiness where the mind can just be happy no matter what. You're walking down the street, you smell the flowers. Wow, that's really great. That's a wonderful smell. Oh, there's the sewer. Okay, let me just keep walking, right? No repulsion, no upset, no anger, right? You see that child that is holding the parent's hand and say, wow, that's really wonderful. Look at that. The child's holding the hand. Oh, that's so beautiful. You see the parent slap the child across the face. This is really unfortunate, right? But you're not going to be upset and angry and frustrated about it. Whether you choose to do anything about these kinds of things, that's a whole nother question, right? But we're just talking about how to maintain your calmness and composure. You hear that music when you're at the traffic light, and it's like, wow, that's my jam. All right, dance, have a good time, right? Enlightened beings have fun. That's one of the things that people oftentimes are misunderstanding is they see the pictures of the Buddha. He's all solemn in meditation all the time. You think that maybe enlightened beings are like that? No, that's just the way people are depicting him. Enlightened beings have fun. They actually have more fun than unenlightened beings, because unenlightened beings can only have fun when things are going their way. Right? And enlightened beings can have fun all the time. So you hear that music that you normally listen to, okay, you're dancing in your seat in the car. But then that other music comes up, and it's like, hey, that's not the music I listen to, but that guy's having fun. Hey, good for you, buddy. Have fun, enjoy. Right? And you know this is only a 3-minute thing, and he's going to be gone, and now you can just continue to drive. Right? So you can have fun no matter what. But in the unenlightened state, when that person comes up to you with music you don't like, you'll be grumpy and irritable. So enlightened beings actually have way more fun than unenlightened beings, because they can have fun no matter what's going on. They don't have a craving for permanence. So when you're experiencing any discontentedness, the way to get to this permanent peace and permanent joy is whenever you're experiencing conditioned pleasant feelings, painful feelings, or neither painful nor pleasant, cut it off and let it go. Understanding that the conditioned pleasant feelings are just as much a problem as the painful ones. Now you move to second step, that you need to, when your mind's calm and you're relaxed, that could take a couple of minutes, it could take a couple of days, take a couple of hours. Now you start reflecting, you start looking inward. What was my craving? What was it that led to that discontentedness? What was the mind longing, yearning for? And then once you identify your cravings that led to this discontentedness, then you put together a plan. a specific plan to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment, which I'm going to give you examples of that. You need to maintain your breathing mindfulness meditation and your generosity, because that's targeting your all your cravings, desires, attachments. You need to maintain that. But there's this plan that you're going to put together that's going to specifically target each one of your cravings, desires, attachments, which is almost going to surgically remove it out of the mind. And then you're going to repeat this process for every single situation where you're having discontentedness. Okay, so now let me show you an example. One time I was driving in the car. It was my wife's car. I didn't have a car at the time. I was driving my wife's truck, and I was at this stoplight, happened to be at a stoplight, and I reached down to touch my pocket where I normally keep my phone, and I realized that my phone was not in my pocket. I'd left it at home. And right away I noticed fear coming up into the mind that I didn't have my mobile phone with me. So in the moment, step number one, I cut it off and let it go. Cut it off and let it go. Felt the bodily sensation of fear coming. I cut it off and let it go. And I happened to be at a stoplight. And right away, with my mind's lack of wisdom, the first thing I wanted to do is turn around and go home and go get the phone. That's what the mind wanted. It was craving permanence. It was craving for that phone to be permanent. But I knew that was unwise. So I said, nope, that's not what I'm going to do, because that doesn't solve the problem. Going home and getting the phone doesn't solve the problem, because inside the mind, there's a craving for permanence. And just going home to get the phone doesn't actually solve the mind's ability to let that go. The mind has to let it go. If I went and got the phone, it just allows the craving to stay in there. So I needed to get rid of this craving. So instead of turning around and going to get the phone, I decided I was going to continue in my day, right? So when I reflected on this, I knew that it was the phone that the mind was craving. So then I put the plan together, sitting right there at the stoplight. I said, you know what? I'm not going to go get the phone. I'm going to keep on going in my day. And I was only supposed to be outside for about an hour and a half, but I decided to extend my amount of time outside. I decided to stay out for 5-6 hours. I went to the movies. I went to dinner. I did all kinds of things. I stayed outside for longer because my mind wanted to hightail it back home and go get that phone. It was craving for that phone to be permanent. And I was like, no, you're not going to get that. You're going to go outside and be outside and train your mind to be outside without this phone, that this phone is impermanent. It is not permanent in your life. So now I stayed outside for 5 or 6 hours. And then eventually I came home. And when I came home, I didn't just go rush to the phone and check to see what was on the phone. Instead, I played with my son for a little bit, maybe 30 minutes or an hour. And then I actually went and looked at the phone. I was like, oh, okay, here's the phone. And I started doing whatever I needed to do on the phone. So I knew that I had this craving. I knew that just doing this one time wasn't going to eliminate the craving. So I needed to do it again. So I waited about 2 or 3 days, and then I intentionally left the phone at home. And now when I went outside, I felt uncomfortable. I didn't have the fear that I had the first day, but I felt uncomfortable being outside without the phone. And once again, I stayed outside for 5 or 6 hours or so. And I did my whole day, went around all these different places. And then I came home. And when I came home, I didn't go look at the phone right away. I started doing other things in the home. And then eventually I went and looked at the phone. And then I waited another 3, 4, 5 days. And then I did it again. And I intentionally left the phone at home. And then I went outside and I noticed there was no uncomfortableness whatsoever. I felt completely content and peaceful. Didn't even think about the phone. Went outside, did all my stuff, 4, 5, 6 hours. And then I came home. No big deal. And I thought I had eliminated this craving. So then about 2 or 3 months went by. And I hadn't done this anymore because I figured I'd eliminated the craving. And after about 2 or 3 months, I was driving on my motorbike one day and I reached down to get the phone and it wasn't there. And I was like, oh, well, and I just kept on driving. No fear, no uncomfortableness, no nothing. And I was convinced at that point that I had eliminated the craving. But then about a year after that, I accidentally dropped the phone and the screen shattered. And I looked at the phone and I started laughing. And I was like, ha, 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 of course, because it's impermanent, right? And then I just Fortunately, my wife had another phone and I was able to use her phone because I didn't have the money to buy another phone. So she gave me that other phone and I just used that other phone. So if you have a craving for permanence, when that phone shatters, when the screen shatters, you're going to be upset. You're going to be angry and frustrated, right? So this is how you eliminate a craving almost surgically. When you're in the moment and there's discontentedness, cut it off and let it go. Don't even think about it. Just cut it off and let it go. That's going to train your mind to be restrained. And that's why you're regularly doing breathing mindfulness meditation. And that's why you're regularly practicing generosity. So you're proactively training the mind to let go. Then when you've let go and your mind is calm, you start reflecting, you start looking inward. What is the mind longing, yearning for here? What is it craving? What is it wanting to be permanent? The phone, that's what it's attached to. Okay, well, what's our plan? Our plan is that we need to put the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. We need to go outside and be without the phone. And now I did that multiple times, right? And now when I came home, I didn't go to the phone right away. Then you repeat that over and over and over again for each individual craving, desire, attachment that you have. Because in the unenlightened state, you're like standing on the top of a trash heap and you've got all these cravings that the mind has and you're standing on top of this and you need to clear that out and clear that out and clear that out and clear that out until eventually you're on stable ground. And this is the process that you can use. Anything that you're having painful feelings from, like the painful feeling of fear, where I'm sorry, let me back up. Anything that you're having pleasant feelings for, which I had pleasant feelings when I had my phone, you're going to need to distance yourself from that object and train your mind to let it go. And you're going to need to distance yourself from it for a period of time. Anything that you're getting painful feelings from, you're going to need to include that thing into your life. So I'll give you examples here. Okay. So if you are going to a restaurant and you're having chocolate cake and you're noticing that you're always getting these pleasant feelings every time you have this chocolate cake, that's a conditioned pleasant feeling. You're going to need to distance yourself from that chocolate cake for a period of time. Whether it's 3 months or 6 months or what have you, you're going to need to go to that restaurant or not go to that restaurant and don't order that chocolate cake. You're going to need to train your mind to let go of that craving, desire, attachment. That's the plan that you're going to need to do. You're going to need to figure out a plan to distance yourself from that object that it's having craving, desire, attachment for. When your mind's let go, then you can just start having your chocolate cake again. No big deal, right? Once the mind let go of that craving for the phone, yeah, I can have a phone. No big deal, right? But when your mind's in training, you're going to need to distance yourself from anything that it's having pleasant feelings for. Anything that your mind is averse to and you're pushing away and you're having painful feelings, you're going to need to include that. That's the durian fruit. I was repulsed by durian fruit. I was pushing it away. So I had to include it into my practice. I needed to start exposing the tongue in the mind to that durian fruit in order to train my mind to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment. So anything you're getting pleasant feelings from, you're going to need to distance yourself for a period of time. And then ultimately, when your mind let go, for certain things, you'll be able to do that, whether it's chocolate cake or something like that. But if it's cocaine or heroin or things like this, you're not going to go back to that, right? Things that you're repulsed by and that you're pushing away, you're going to need to include that into your life, like the durian fruit, right? So this is how you do this. Any questions on this? Using the discontentedness as a red light, alerting you, hey, you've got a problem here. You've got craving, desire, attachment. And if you can look inward and figure it out, great. But if not, then you can talk to your teacher and your teacher will help you to be able to develop this skill. And that's one of the things that people sometimes do during the question period, that if you have a certain craving, you can talk about that and I can help you to see how to put together a plan. Or if you can think about a plan in your mind right now and you can say, hey, David, this is my craving. This is what I think my plan should be. Does this sound reasonable to you? Is this going to help me to eliminate this craving? So that's one of the things you can do during the question period.
Okay, so let's say I have the craving, because you mentioned on the street when you see a child get slapped, let's say I have the craving for seeing all kids be safe and not, be slapped. So how would I mean, yeah, how would I target that, for example?
Sure. So if you're repulsed by this, right? The mind has painful feelings, so you're going to actually need to include that into your practice, where you look at like YouTube videos or images, pictures on the internet. That's one of the beautiful things about the time frame that we live in, is we can expose the mind to that. So let's just say you look at a YouTube video. Let's say 30 seconds in, you notice the anger arising. You're going to start to need to cut that off and cut that off and cut that out. And now not look at the YouTube video for a little bit and train your mind to be calm and peaceful, right? And now maybe you wait a couple of hours or a couple of days, and then you're going to need to look at it again. And now instead of 30 seconds it takes for the mind to get frustrated, maybe it takes a minute, and now the mind becomes frustrated, and you cut that off and cut that off, and you don't look at the YouTube video for a few days. And then you need to look at it again. And then eventually you'll get to the point where you can look at it. You still don't agree with it. You don't think it's beautiful. You're not aspiring for this to happen for kids, but you can look at it and there's no conditioned feelings coming up. So you're going to need to expose the mind to that. Mm-hmm.
Teacher David, question on determining whether I'm suppressing what I'm trying to cut off and let go, and actually cutting it off and letting it go.
Mm-hmm.
Is there, what would be the difference?
Yeah, if you're suppressing your feelings or repressing them, it's going to be painful. It's going to hurt. The bodily sensations are still going to be there. If you cut it off and let it go, then the mind will be free. The Buddha calls this maturing and release, that the mind will mature and mature and mature and mature, and then it'll release. So while we call it cutting it off and letting it go, the truth is, the reality of this is you're going to cut it off and 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 cut it off. And 4 months down the road, you'll let it go. Right? That's called maturing and release, that the mind needs to mature before it will release. And some of these cravings, desires, attachments, you can actually feel physically the moment that the mind actually releases it out of the mind. So you're always cutting off and letting go, but understand that the craving, like with the phone, the first time when I was at the traffic light, I was cutting it off and I let it go in that moment. But when I went out the second time, there was still this uncomfortableness. The craving was still there. It hadn't fully let go yet. So you're going to need to cut it off and cut it off and cut it off and cut it off and cut it off. And then the mind will let it go. It's called maturing and release. Whereas if you're suppressing it, you'll feel physical pain in the body because the mind's just pushing it down. You haven't actually truly released it out of the mind. Mm-hmm.
Teacher. Thank you, teacher. So I've been working on the cutting off and letting go at the bodily sensations. And the unpleasant feelings were much easier to sort of pinpoint and let go. And then the pleasurable feelings were a lot harder to let go because they just felt so good. But I understand letting those go. And so I've been working on that and distancing myself when I get excited. I notice it and I try to just calm the mind and see what's happening in the mind, whatever it is that I'm experiencing, whether it's, pleasant or unpleasant. And so I see all of that. But the hard one for me to really let go of is the relationship with my partner. Very attached, and we've talked about this. And so I know that there's contemplation of death, meditation, which I still haven't done yet. And I think that's probably next. But I'm just wondering, like, we're trying to not sit next to each other and maybe not talk to each other so much when we're doing, while we're here. Is there anything else other than the contemplation meditation that you can think?
I know you've been trying to avoid that for a long time because your mind just doesn't want to fathom it. And that's because the mind's craving. So this contemplation of death that she's talking about is that if you have an attachment to a person or a living being, even like your animals and stuff like that, you can do something that the Buddha taught called contemplation of death or reflection of death. Because the biggest most significant impermanence that you can experience in a relationship is the death of that being. And the mind oftentimes is very uncomfortable with that, but it is going to occur, right? The relationship is either going to be over prior to death and you guys just go your separate ways, or you're going to be with this person all the way throughout this life and one of you guys are going to die first. And it's going to be very painful. So what the Buddha teaches you to do is, because that's painful, because the mind's pushing that away, you've got to expose the mind to that. That's what I'm talking about here, is putting the mind in the situation that it doesn't want to be in. So you're going to need to confront that. And what this is you sit quietly. It's not actually a meditation, but you actually sit quietly with your eyes closed and you envision that this person has died. Like, maybe you've gotten a phone call from doctors or nurses or a police officer or their family members, and they're informing you that this person has died. And you live that out in your mind, almost convincing the mind that this person has truly died. And you play it out like you're going to their funeral, their burial, their cremation, whatever it is. You play that out. And even the part after that, where your life goes on, because oftentimes we can't imagine going through life without this person. So you need to play out the other part too, which is after the death. So you can see that your mind can go through this, and you might actually grieve during this process, because death is kind of like waiting in the corner for each one of us. And death is going to come visit every single one of us, our own death and the death of the people around us. And we can wait for death to sneak up on us and catch us by surprise and cut us off at the knees and pull the carpet out from under our legs. And we'll be completely surprised by it. Or we can say, you know what, death, I see you back there in the corner and I know you're going to come visit me, but you know what? I'm going to come visit you. I'm going to come get comfortable with you. I'm going to confront this, that yes, this being is going to die, or you're going to die first. So that's what contemplation of death is, that you live that out in your mind. You're going to need to do that multiple times. Usually you spread this out over about a month. You do it once and you do it a month later and then a month later, and you do it like this, because your mind is probably going to be sad for a period of time. But you need the Eightfold Path well underway, so that way you have the ability to regain your composure, to be able to cut off and let go and do your breathing mindfulness meditation. So you really need to do that. That's going to be a big piece, to be able to cut off and let go and eliminate your attachment. You see, you just thinking about it, you're just probably discontent, right? So yes, there's that. But then also those other things that you're talking about, those are helpful too, where you're choosing not to sit with each other, where yesterday you rode in separate vans once, not on the way back, but at least on the way there, you guys were in separate vans. Those kinds of things will help you, because then it's training your mind that this person is impermanent. And then the beauty in this is that you enjoy the time that you're with him. And then when you're away from him, you can enjoy that time too. Whereas if you're attached to him, you can only enjoy your time when you're with him. And when you're away from each other, you don't feel good. That's the problem in the unenlightened mind, is that it can only feel happy when it's getting what it wants. It's almost like your TED fix, right? It's almost like being addicted to a drug or a substance. It's like if you get your fix, you feel happy and you feel high. But if you're not getting your fix, then you don't feel good. You feel miserable or lonely or bored, or you're missing him. So you would like to get to the point where you can enjoy your time with him and you can enjoy your time away from him. And that's where liberation is, and that's where freedom is. So all these things that you're doing, there's those types of things. Even when you guys are out like this, and I think you guys do this sometimes, where like you go do yoga and Ted goes off to his meetings that he likes to go to, or you guys go do different things, even when you're on vacation like this together. That's helpful, that you're not always together every single moment of your vacation. Because sometimes when you go on vacation with someone, you feel like you have to be together all the time. But if you guys go off and do separate things, this will really help you too.
So when we live normal life together, everyday life at home, we actually don't spend a lot of time together. But it's the idea that he's there, right? Because I mean, we'll be in the same house together, but not even speak. But I know he's there. So I think that's the attachment. It's not necessarily being with him physically all the time. I don't think I could do that. No offense, but
Do you ever go on vacation by yourself, either you or Ted?
Yes, I have, but
Okay.
with like girlfriends for
Yeah.
like a weekend or something.
Yeah, that's also helpful too.
Yeah.
To go by yourself on vacations and events like that and stuff.
It's the idea like that.
Yeah. So this is a very strong attachment, right? Life partners, parents, children, people like this, very deep attachments. It's not going to be eliminated in 1 month or 1 year, even. Even my wife, I saw her attachment to her son, even with the teacher being at the house and me doing things with them to help them get rid of their attachment. It took her like 5 years to get rid of her attachment to her son, right? So it's going to take you some time. The contemplation of death is really going to take you up several notches, and then doing all these other little things. Over time, your mind will finally let go. Going to play pickleball, and it's okay that he's there with those people, right? That's really helpful for that kind of thing to occur. So, you just need to do it because the mind's maturing, and then it releases eventually. Mm-hmm. You're welcome. Yes, sir.
Discontentedness is basically either craving or aversion, right?
No, discontentedness is the pleasant feelings, painful feelings, and neither painful nor pleasant. It's the conditioned feelings. The craving is going to produce either a longing, yearning, or it's going to produce aversion where you're pushing that away. But that's not the discontentedness. That's the cause of the discontentedness, is the craving. The mind's either going to long and yearn for this thing, or it's going to try to push it away, depending on if it gets pleasant feelings or if it gets painful feelings. But the discontentedness is the conditioned feelings, pleasant, painful, neither painful nor pleasant. So happiness, excitement, elation, thrill, exhilaration, euphoria, that's the pleasant feelings. Then those are conditioned. And now conditioned meaning if the sun is out, you'll be happy. And then there's the painful feelings. That's the anger, sadness, frustration, irritation, annoyance, guilt, shame, fear, stress, anxiety. So now if you get happy when it's sunny, then that means when it rains, you're going to get the painful feelings because the mind's craving for that sun to be permanent, but it's not permanent. So that's the painful feelings. Then there's the neither painful nor pleasant, like shyness. It's not painful, it's not pleasant, it's neither painful nor pleasant. The mind is dissatisfied or uncomfortable.
Okay. Like, why? Thing is, maybe I eat this durian fruit and I don't like it, and then I eat it again and I don't. I mean, why do I have to go through this process? Or, for one thing, and then the chocolate cake. If I go to this coffee shop every day and have the chocolate cake, of course there's a problem. I can recognize it very easily. It's like addiction.
Mm-hmm.
But what if I do it on a weekly basis or a monthly basis? But I still know that in this coffee shop, they have that cake.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe if they don't have that cake, I will get something else. But I know I like this cake, then I will order it when I'm there.
Yeah.
So how to recognize this, or why to fight something that maybe it doesn't taste good for me, and then I will continue.
Mm-hmm.
Like, why do I need to, or do I need to really go through this process? And
yeah, the reason why it doesn't taste good to you is because of the sensual desire in the mind. That's the pollution that's in the mind, that the mind's going to see things as agreeable or disagreeable. And it can only be happy when it's getting agreeable contact. And when it's getting disagreeable contact, it's going to get these painful feelings. So as long as you allow the sensual desire, that pollution of sensual desire in the mind, it's only a matter of time before it gets triggered about something. So you need to get rid of the sensual desire in order to get to the permanent peace and permanent joy. Also, when you're eliminating these pollutions of mind, that's where the concentration and the focus and the clarity and the deep memory is coming in. That's where you get to the point where all your personal and professional relationships can be harmonious and at ease. That's where you get to the point where you're not even experiencing a bad mood any longer. That's where you can get to the point where you have sustainable energy all day long and you don't get exhausted and tired. So if you allow the sensual desire to stay in your mind, you'll go out in your day, and when all your sensual desires are getting fulfilled, you'll be like, wow, this was such a great day. Oh my, it feels so great. But when you go out in your day and your sensual desires aren't getting fulfilled, you'll say, this was the most horrible day ever. And you'll feel exhausted and you'll feel tired. So if you're looking to get to this peace and joy where the mind is enlightened, you need to be able to eliminate the sensual desire. And the way that you do that is the examples that I'm giving. So that's why you would be wise to expose your mind to the things that it sees to be disagreeable, because it's pushing these things away. And as long as you allow the mind to keep doing that, it's going to continue to stay there and you're going to continue to experience these discontent feelings. One of the ways you might think about it is your unenlightened mind is kind of like a 3-year-old child throwing a temper tantrum. It can only be happy when it gets what it wants. And when it doesn't get what it wants, it throws a temper tantrum. And the temper tantrum is the anger, the sadness, the stress, the anxiety. And as long as you keep feeding this temper tantrum, the child's going to keep doing it. The way that you eliminate this is you need to train the mind to not have this sensual desire, that it can be completely pleased and it can enjoy the bananas, but it can be completely enjoy and pleased with the durian fruit too. But you won't ever get to that if you keep pushing the durian fruit away and allowing the sensual desire to stay there. It's like feeding a monster, and the monster just keeps getting bigger and bigger and bigger.
But you would still choose the banana over the durian, you said before.
At this point in my life, yeah, I would, because there's a preference and I prefer that and I like that taste, but I also like the durian fruit too. I can eat durian fruit. And I've done that multiple times to make sure that the mind doesn't have sensual desire as it relates to the durian fruit. So that's why you got to test your mind. The Buddha calls this direct experience. So you're going to need to experience some painful feelings in order to be able to get to enlightenment. When we talk about enlightenment, sometimes people think like, oh, it must be like rainbows and butterflies and walking on clouds and stuff like this. The fact is that your mind has cravings, and there are certain pleasant feelings that you're getting from those cravings. And the last thing your mind really truly wants to do is let those cravings go. It wants to hold on to these cravings. It doesn't want to experience these painful feelings. But it's painful to be away from your partner, right? When you go away, when you have that craving, it's painful. But you're never going to get rid of that painful feeling if you don't walk through it. The way that I talk about it is it's like walking through the fire in order to appreciate the fresh air on the other side. Or another way to think about it is it's like joining the mafia. We all joined the mafia, all of us, that we all had craving, desire, attachment. And now when we started getting our cravings, desires, attachments fulfilled, we felt really great. We felt really happy. But now when we have to walk away from those things, it's very painful. It's just like joining the mafia. When you join the mafia, wow, it's so pleasurable. You got all these new friends. You got protection. You got new ways to make money. Wow, I'm in the mafia. Wow, look at this. But then when you try to get away from the mafia, that's really painful, right? To walk out of the mafia. So it's the same thing that with all these cravings that your mind has, you're getting all these pleasant feelings from them. And the last thing the mind wants to do is walk away from that because it's painful. But you're going to have to walk through those painful feelings in order to get to the fresh air on the other side and get to the peace and joy on the other side. So you'll get to a point where, yeah, you can enjoy the bananas and you can enjoy the durian fruit, but you'll have preferences, but you've tested your mind in these situations to make sure that your mind isn't tricking you. Because early like this, your mind's going to trick you. It'll be like, oh, I can eat the durian fruit, but I'm just going to prefer to eat the bananas. But until you've actually eat the durian fruit several times and you've tested your mind to see if there's any discontentedness there, you don't really know. So that's why you need to expose your mind to these things to be able to test it.
I've been fighting with different addiction throughout my life. And then I've been to India and I was there 6 months, and all of a sudden there's no coffee, there's no beer. And then I'm fine without coffee and beer.
Mm-hmm.
Then I get to Vietnam and the coffee is so good and there's beer everywhere.
Mm-hmm.
And so I have my coffee daily. I have my beer. I don't know if I'm I don't really have craving for it. Like how to recognize when it's a matter of craving or a matter of, yeah, I can just drink that beer and have my daily coffee just because it's there and it's good. I can also not have it.
Yeah.
How it's like how to balance this feeling. I think I imagine, yeah.
Sure. This is where you need to look at what is the purpose of putting liquid into this body. The purpose of putting liquid into this body is to hydrate the body. That's the purpose of putting liquid into the body. But because of your central desire, your tongue, the mind, is going to want that flavor of the beer and the effects of the beer. And it's going to want that flavor of the coffee and the effects of the coffee, which is the caffeine. So you need to be able to look at what's the true purpose of putting liquid into this body. It's to hydrate the body. So what you might find as you're training your mind like this is a large percentage of the time you might just decide to drink water, right? And that's okay for you. And you'll just drink water. But then occasionally you might have a smoothie, you might have something else. But something like caffeine and beer, that's a substance that causes heedlessness. And if you study the 5 precepts, which you were here when I taught the 5 precepts, you would know that it's unwise to put those things into the body because of the substance that causes heedlessness. And what's happening here is the mind is craving that heedlessness, even if it's just very little. And it's also craving the certain central desire through the tongue, that flavor of the beer and the flavor of the coffee. Because otherwise you could just do what is wise, which is put liquid into the body to hydrate the body.
Okay. And then on the other hand, there are substances that I know they're not good for me. Marijuana. I smoke it. I don't like the suffocation I have in my lungs and the cloudy feeling. I don't like it.
Mm-hmm.
But if I only smell it, I just have to smell it somewhere and I immediately lose control and I want it.
Mm-hmm.
Or something, my mind reacts to something it wanted maybe before. And then it's a fight of control every time.
Yep. That's why these 6 sense bases are so helpful for you to have that wisdom, because by having the wisdom of the 6 sense bases, and you know that you're trying to fight this craving of marijuana, because by choosing not to smoke marijuana, your mind's going to be more clear, the body's going to be more healthy. You understand that's a wise decision. And now by understanding the 6 sense bases, that it's the odor of the marijuana that's pulling you in, that's where you need to completely distance yourself from this, because you're getting pleasant feelings from it. And whenever you're getting pleasant feelings, you need to distance yourself from that. So I would encourage you to stay as far away from marijuana as possible for an extended period of time and train your mind through the Eightfold Path with breathing mindfulness meditation, with generosity, and all the other teachings on the Eightfold Path. And over time, you'll get rid of that craving. It'll get eliminated from the mind because it's not permanent. But you're going to need to distance yourself from it for an extended period of time to train the mind to let it go. And be guarding your doorway, because this doorway of the nose is how your craving is getting triggered.
Okay, and one last question about permanence. You talked about this phone that is shattering, and you say, yeah, it's impermanent. It's impermanent, so it shatters, but then immediately you have another phone.
Mm-hmm.
So this impermanence is, the phone is permanent in your life, in our lives. We want to think of it as not, but as the moment it was shattered, your wife gave you another phone.
It didn't happen that way, but the phone is not permanent, because you'll leave it at home sometimes, it'll get shattered. If you crave permanence, the mind will experience discontentedness, but the phone is not permanent. The phone will stop working, it'll be slow. You're not going to experience permanence with this phone.
Maybe not with a specific object, but you will replace it with another, the actual idea of having a phone, of owning a phone is, it's ridiculous to say it's permanent. In your lifetime, you will always have a phone. Maybe you can leave it for 5 hours, like you said, but I think that the example that you gave, for me, it sounded very permanent. You wanted to give an example of impermanence, and I perceived it as a permanence.
Yeah, it's not permanent. Even if it's broken for 1 second or 3 seconds, it's not permanent. And the way that you'll know that your mind is either attached to it or not attached to it is based on the discontentedness. that's the indicator for you of whether there's a craving, desire, attachment in the mind. So in the situation that the phone broke and the mind was not discontent in that situation, helped me to be able to see that the mind was not attached to it. And I already knew that before the phone broke because I went outside without the phone for extended periods of time. And when I went out initially, there was discontentedness. There was fear and uncomfortableness when I went out initially. But then when I went out previously or after that, without the phone, there was no discontentedness. And then that one situation where I went out and I didn't realize I'd left the phone at home, and I was like, oh, well, I don't have the phone. And I just kept going. So I could see there was no discontentedness in the mind. And therefore I knew there was no craving, desire, attachment. And then ultimately that was further confirmed by when the phone broke. So the phone is impermanent, and your discontentedness, either pleasant, painful, or neither painful nor pleasant, is what's going to help you to be able to ensure whether or not there's craving in the mind or not. Craving for permanence.
Okay, because if my phone breaks, I know everything is backed up.
Mm-hmm.
You know, it's backed up. I can just, I don't, okay, this object is impermanent, but again, I'm repeating the same thing. I will replace it and the backup will come back. I
Right.
can leave it for 5 hours. I can leave it when it's shattered. I don't have to really, I mean, if it happens, I will not react so much. I know it's just money, right? I will go get another one and I get the backup from the cloud. And but the thing I'm trying to say is that it is permanent in our lives.
Yeah, you need to be able to look at the universal truth of impermanence and see that it's not permanent. Even if it breaks.
I understand the philosophy behind it. I really understand that the phone is impermanent.
Yeah.
But then, like the actual life that I'm living, I wish it was. I wish I could do without it, or. But then the actual fact is that I will probably live my whole life with the phone until the day I die.
You can put the mind in situations where you don't have the phone for extended periods of time, and that's going to train your mind to let go. And now if you just choose after your mind has let go and you see there's no discontentedness, and now if you just choose to actually have a phone, it's still not permanent in your life. It's impermanent, but your mind is no longer craving for it to be permanent. The phone is impermanent. And you got to get to the point where your mind's not craving for it to be permanent. And the way that you do that is you distance your mind from it for extended periods of time. And that's what'll train your mind to let it go. Maybe something you need to think about. You're not seeming to get it right now. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay, just a couple of questions. I guess just going back to the first item on this list here, I appreciate and I understand the training of all this, that it's great, it makes sense to me, and there are things that I want to go and, do. But just the first one, cutting it off, I mean, different levels, different kinds of discontentedness, from very minor to big, or just having a bad day. Sometimes I just have a bad day, I have a very bad day, I have a very good day, very good, but it's just not, I can do it while I'm meditating like 100 times, cut it off, let it go. But if I'm in a bad day, I can't just turn it off. It takes a long time. It's just like, I can't just, first step, okay, I'm going to stop feeling that way, and then I'm going to start looking at why did I feel that way. I can't stop it.
Yeah, that's the practice. That's where the mind needs to be under development. That's why it's gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So while I'm teaching you what you need to do with the mind can't always do that, right? So that's where sometimes it can get very frustrating on the path to enlightenment, because intellectually you'll know what you need to do and what you should be doing, but the mind just won't do it. So that's the practice. That's the gradual training, gradual practice, and gradual progress. So you just keep working at it. So the way that you might think about it is like, if this is the unenlightened mind, and the unenlightened mind is going forward and lurching forward with all these cravings, desires, attachments, there's this parallel process that Boulder has, where you're trying to do enough meditation, you're trying to do enough practice of generosity, enough of cutting off and letting go, that eventually this process gets in front of the mind, and now you fully encompass the mind. but you're not there yet, right? So you're trying to get to that point where you've accumulated enough of the teachings and you've meditated enough and absorbed enough of that where you can get a front of it. But that's not where you're at right now. You're still a work in progress. So it's not until you get to the jhanas that your mindfulness is even fully developed. You can't even get to the point where you notice your discontentedness as a bodily sensation every single time until you even get to the jhanas. So there's some work for you to do. And that's where you don't put expectations on yourself to be perfect today and understand that you're a work in progress. Mm-hmm.
Do we have time? Okay, ask one more question.
Mm-hmm.
I actually mentioned this to you once, sometime, but one thing I'm really surprised, and it's not criticism. I value, like, I really like all the things you're teaching us and what Buddhism is and is not, and examples of that. It's great. But one key thing that I previously in my, everything I've learned about Buddhism, there's always sort of an emphasis of sitting with the pain, going into the pain, feeling like all the way from the way you recommend we sit, just, it shouldn't be, we're training the mind, we shouldn't be in pain. But here, like, this is the first time you ever really say, it's just, you just have to be with, train it to feel the, you're not allowing yourself the chocolate cake, you're even create situations where you see it and don't allow yourself to have it, and it's a sort of a enduring the pain, sitting with it, going through it, feeling it, and then ultimately letting go of it. But this thing of sort of mindfulness, being aware of and what's going on in your mind and body, and to not cut it off, to live with it, to go into it, to really feel it, to take it all in. In my mind, you're getting more data, more information about the problem, and you gotta feel bad, and then you gotta understand it more, feel it, and then you've got all this stuff to sort through and reflect on and figure out. That's why cutting it off right away, to me, it might be just, feel the pain of.
Yeah, that's not what I teach. That's not what the Buddha teaches. You might have heard those things from other people, but that's not what's going to lead to enlightenment. So there's a confusion that you have here. You'll never hear me say, just breathe through the pain. But the confusion you're having is the difference between physical pain and mental pain. These are two different things. You're never interested in causing physical pain to the body. That would be unwise. But the fact is that this body is going to be physically experiencing pain at some points in your life. Even as an enlightened being, you will experience physical pain because the body is not permanent and it will experience physical pain. Yeah. So there's physical pain that you would not be interested in inflicting on the body, but you know that it is going to happen. And if you have a craving in your mind for permanent comfort of the body, when you're experiencing physical pain, you will also experience mental anguish along with it. You'll experience discontentedness. This is like getting hit by two darts. You get hit with the first dart and it's the physical pain. And then because the mind is now craving permanent comfort of the body, you immediately experience mental anguish. That's the second dart. By the time you get to enlightenment, you'll experience the first dart, you'll experience the physical pain, but you won't experience any mental anguish because your mind doesn't have a craving for permanent comfort of the body. So because of that, your physical pain is very muted in the enlightened mental state. And you actually need this little bit of physical pain in the enlightened mental state, because if you were standing too close to a fire and you feel that heat sensation, that's important input for you to know to move away from the fire, right? So you will never hear me say, breathe through the pain and sit in meditation in a certain way and just breathe through it. I don't teach that. But what I was teaching you earlier is that you're going to need to expose the mind to certain things that it sees to be mentally painful, that when you smell that sewer, you don't like that smell, and now that arises painful feelings and the mind's pushing that away. So you know what I did is I used to live near probably about 10 miles away from a sewer plant when I was in Washington, D.C. I don't know, she might know there's this sewer plant right on the way into Washington, D.C. And every time you go through there, about a mile or two, boy, it's really strong, right? And when I used to drive through there, I never liked that. So one day I got in my car, I drove down to that sewer plant, I parked right in front of the sewer plant, and I breathed it all in. I stood there for a while. And then now I don't have any discontentedness, right? So I needed to experience that mental pain. But the only reason why that mental pain was there is because of the craving, because of the sensual desire, right? But then once that releases out of your mind, you don't experience that mental pain any longer. That mental pain is gone. So now no matter what I smell, I can experience peace and joy. Right. So there's two different things here, physical pain and mental pain. And what I'm talking about is you're going to experience some mental pain on your way to enlightenment. You can't avoid that because you've joined the mafia and you got to get out. Mm-hmm. Yeah. Any others? Yep.
Is laughing an uncontrollable joy? If I am enlightened, can I laugh?
Yeah, love is an unconditioned mental quality. It's not a feeling. Oftentimes people think love is a feeling. If you think love is a feeling, I don't know if you think that way or not, but if somebody thinks that way, they're not understanding love yet, because feelings, they're conditional. They arise, change, and fade away. But love, true love, it doesn't arise, it doesn't change, and it doesn't fade away. It's unconditional. So what people are oftentimes thinking of love, where they're falling in love and out of love with someone, that's actually not love. That's craving, desire, attachment. By the time you get to true love and you're practicing true love, it's actually permanent. It's unconditioned. And you can have love for others, like a genuine interest in seeing all beings be well. I love each one of you. Every single one of you. I love you. I love every single being. That's why I come here every day to share these teachings. And I don't want anything from you or expect anything from you. I'm just sharing these teachings because I have a genuine interest in seeing you be well. I have compassion for you. I have concern for your misfortune. I know it feels miserable to live in discontentedness. And then I'm interested in helping people beyond and get out of that. So that's from my love. That's my unconditional love, that I have a genuine interest in seeing you be well. So you can love, and you will love deeper, and you will love more in the enlightened mental state than in the unenlightened mental state. In the unenlightened mental state, the mind doesn't understand love, and it's not practicing true love. It's practicing craving, desire, attachment. That if you do things my way, I will say I love you. I will act like I love you. I will function like I love you. But when you stop doing things my way, I don't love you anymore. That's what we were talking about with the housewarming thing or the party. If you come to my party, I will like you and I'll spend time with you and I'll be cheerful around you. But if you don't come to my party, I'm going to be angry and frustrated, irritated. That's not true love. And what you would like to do is more and more cultivate true love in your mind for other people, and then cultivate relationships around you where people are practicing true love with you, because now you'll have a much better experience that way. Mm-hmm.
Okay, I have another question, which is about personal preferences.
Mm-hmm.
Why then do you have the personal preference for a banana over a durian?
Mm-hmm.
Me, myself, may think that the durian is more delicious than a banana.
Yeah, these are just opinions that we have based on our experiences, right? But you need to be sure that you don't have a craving. And that's why I was explaining how you need to test the mind and put the mind in those situations so you can see that there's no discontentedness. Because you know what discontentedness feels like. When I used to eat durian fruit and I was repulsed by it, I know what that is like. That's what your mindfulness is helping you to be able to see. And when you overcome that and you don't have that anymore, you can see that. So that's why you need to expose your mind to that multiple times. But then if I was in front of a fruit stand, the durian fruit isn't the one that I'm going to pick first. But if I was in a desert and there was only durian fruit, I would eat the durian fruit. I would be completely comfortable and content with that. I have no problems with durian fruit, but I just would prefer to eat the banana instead. So it's just a personal preference that the mind has, but it's not based in craving, desire, attachment. But you need to expose your mind to this multiple times to test it so you can see if there's discontentedness or not. Nobody else can do that for you. That's why you need to take on the wisdom of how to do that so that you can do it, and then you'll see the truth for yourself.
The last question, Can't an enlightened being have like uncontrollable joy? Meaning, for example, laughing. I tell you a joke and you laugh because you think it's funny. Isn't that uncontrollable joy that you express through laughing? Ha ha ha.
No, an enlightened being will laugh. An enlightened being will laugh and have fun. Like I said, they're having much more fun than an unenlightened being, but their mind is never in an uncontrollable state. They can always control their mind 100% of the time. Yep. Okay, more questions. Yeah.
Okay. I wanted to go back to the example that Kristen brought up of you're working on eliminating a craving to a specific person. And I think in your case, both of you are working at it at the same time. But I can think of a lot of scenarios where maybe one partner is working on that, eliminating the craving, but the other person, is not trying to reach enlightenment, is not involved in this at all, and still has that attachment. And there could be conflict created because you're trying to work on, that separation, healthy separation, and that other person could perceive you as being cold, being detached, and is not showing them love the way that they are used to receiving love. And that can create a lot of conflict in relationships. So is it our role or the role of the person trying to practice this to educate the other person? Or how would you, or give advice to someone that's trying to do this because we want to eliminate the craving, desire, attachment if that person should die, but it can come across quite insensitive to that other person.
Yeah. So the Buddha teaches, and I agree with this because I saw it in my own life too, is that if there's people in your life that you have compassion for and that you think will heed your advice, that it would be wise for you to try to settle and establish them in the Four Noble Truths. And you need to be able to do this skillfully where you're not giving them unsolicited guidance. But I can't remember whether it was this learning event or another one that I was recently talking about this. You were there. It was this one where I was talking about not giving unsolicited guidance and kind of skillfully helping people. Yeah. So that's what you would like to do, is do it skillfully. If you have a partner who's interested in these teachings and is learning these teachings, that makes things all the much better. But if you're currently in a relationship where like your partner isn't interested or they're not here or what have you, and they're not actively learning, you can do skillful things to try to see if they do become interested. Because that's going to make it much better. Because if you're learning about true love and you're practicing true love, it can be very challenging because maybe they go on a business trip and they call you and they say, "Hey, honey, did you miss me?" And you're like, "No." Right. And then they're going to be like, "Don't you love me?"
Yeah.
"No, I love you." Right. This is where you can do like little 30-second lessons. Like, "No, I love you. I'm just not attached to you. I enjoy when I'm with you, honey, but I also enjoy when I'm away from you too." Right. So you can give these little lessons like this and it can help them. If they get on the path, it is going to be much better for them because they're going to be proactively learning and it's going to be better for you too. But even if they don't get on the path, there's ways for you to give these little 30-second, 1-minute little lessons here and there when you're having that phone call and they're like, "Hey, did you miss me?" And you're like, "No." They're like, "What? Don't you love me?" "No, I love you. I really would like to see you be well and have nothing but love in my mind, in my heart for you, but I just don't have an attachment to you. I understand that you're not permanent and you're going to be here sometimes and you're not going to be here other times, and I can be happy when you're here and I can be happy when you're not here." So you give these little 1-minute little lessons here and there, and sometimes they walk away confused and have to think about it,
Or
but
hurt.
nonetheless over a long-term period you can actually help this person to learn.
Okay. Yeah. I think that's going to be difficult in practice, but thank you for sharing.
Well, you can do it. I did it with my wife. My wife was actively on the path. She was learning in Thai, but she didn't understand. Like when I first started talking to her about these teachings in the way that I do now, she thought the physical object was the attachment. She didn't even understand what an attachment was. She thought that she could meditate her way to enlightenment. So I needed to really help her. I was giving her these little 30-second, 1-minute, 2-minute lessons here and there. And she would never tell you that I taught her anything. She would never say that. But my son knows because my son was there. He saw what I was doing consistently all the way throughout multiple years of helping her to be able to see the teachings in ways that she didn't understand. So if you would like that kind of help, I will help you to do that. But it's going to start with you first learning the Eightfold Path. The only time that things are challenging, like right now you said, wow, that would be very challenging for me. The only reason why is because you don't have the wisdom. Once you have the wisdom, it's not challenging anymore. So the way that you start is you start by learning the Eightfold Path. And then once you learn the Eightfold Path and you're practicing it 6 months, 1 year, and you're like, wow, I'd really like to see my husband start practicing these teachings. Now that's where you reach out to me and you say, hey, David, I'd like to start helping my husband to see these teachings. How can I do this? What would be the best way to do this? And now I can help you, and you can build that wisdom. But without the wisdom of the Eightfold Path, then you wouldn't be able to do those kinds of things. So first, dedicate some time and prioritize your own learning and development. And then as you're becoming more and more peaceful and your husband can see this, he's going to be like, what are you doing? Right? It's kind of like if you saw someone sitting there eating a big piece of chocolate cake and then a big smile on their face, you'd be like, where'd you get that chocolate cake from? That looks really good. It's kind of like when he starts seeing you become more peaceful after 6 months or a year or so, he's going to be like, where'd you get that from? And you're like, oh, that's Buddhism. Really? How can I get some of that? Right? And now he's going to actually be pulling it into his life. So the best way to get started with this is focus on your own practice. Don't feel like you have to rush out and convince him to learn these teachings right now. Just focus on your own practice. That's the best place to start. Mm-hmm. Yes, ma'am.
Interesting. I find myself having a craving for perfection in many different aspects of my life. Perfect performance on a project or presentation, clean home for guests. With something that applies like many different parts of your life, do you recommend focusing on one area first? And then like second part of that is for perfectionism in a work context, like how do you navigate that or create a plan for removing that craving without negatively impacting your work quality, like overcorrecting and like the process of finding the middle way?
Sure. What I recommend on the first one, have you ever heard of the squeaky wheel method? Or the squeaky wheel approach? Okay, if you're pushing a shopping cart and you have 4 wheels on the shopping cart and one of the wheels is squeaking, you're going to put oil on that squeaky wheel, right? And now you can continue to push your shopping cart. So it's the same kind of thing as in your practice. Whatever is causing you the most difficulties and the most hang-ups, wherever you're finding the most challenges, I recommend approaching that first and solving that first. So in your life, if you have a certain relationship or a certain situation that is causing you the most discontentedness, if you approach that first, that's going to clear that up, and you'll see that these methodologies are working, and you'll have more confidence in it. So if you approach those squeaky wheels first, the things that are the biggest challenges, those will tend to be the better ones to approach up front. It can be more challenging, but you're going to see the most progress because it's going to be most impactful to your life. The second one, can you repeat it again? I just think about one thing at a time. So, mm-hmm.
To not overcorrect or like negatively impact your work performance while you're trying to find that middle way and reduce that craving?
That's through your wise decision making. It's just, really make sure as you're moving to the middle that you find that middle more and more and practice it. Working with a great, I don't know if you work for yourself or you work with a boss, but having a really great boss is really wonderful. Like there was a time where I was working in a professional company, and I used to stay there until like 10, 11 o'clock at night, pounding out emails because I was a manager and I had 55 employees. And my manager came in at one point and they said, David, we need you to not be working so much. And I was like, really? What's going on? There's like, well, when you're staying here working until 10, 11 o'clock at night and putting out emails, you're just creating more work for everyone else. You're going to need to learn how to push yourself away from your desk at 5 or 6 o'clock and go home like everybody else. So it's really nice having a good manager that understands these kinds of things. Whereas if you have someone that's trying to push you nose to the grindstone kind of thing, you're not going to be able to find the middle with that kind of manager because they're not in the middle. You need to have if you have a boss, to have a manager who's, they don't necessarily call it Buddhism. Like this person that I'm talking about, she would have never said anything about Buddhism, but she was practicing the middle way. She understood the middle way. So if you're working for someone, it's helpful if that person is practicing the middle and they understand, because then you'll be able to more readily come to the middle, and then they'll be appreciative that you are in the middle. So make wise decisions about who you work for and who you work with, that's going to produce wholesome karma for you. Mm-hmm. Okay. So I think we're probably just about ready to leave. Yeah, it's 12:38. So there's a little bit more here, and I didn't get to dependent origination. I didn't get to another topic, but the way that I do these retreats is I just go wherever you guys need to go. I have a certain plan of what I'm planning to teach, but I'm not tied to that. I'm not clinging to it. I'm not craving it. So if you guys need to ask all these questions and that's what you need from me, then that's what I give you, right? So there's some other things here for me to teach you, but I'll work these into the retreat at different times to make sure that you get everything covered. So this evening, when we talk about a personal existence view, I will probably spend a little bit of time on dependent origination first to make sure that you guys can learn a little bit about dependent origination, because that's important before we start talking about personal existence view, because I can teach personal existence view in a reasonable amount of time, and then I can first, after our meditation this evening, teach you about dependent origination. So it's just so you see how a teacher is practicing. We're not attached. We're not clinging to a certain agenda. That's why we're not pushing. But this was a wonderful discussion. I think many of you guys got things that you needed. A lot of questions were asked. And even those that you that didn't ask questions, you probably learned from the questions that were being asked. So that's what it's all about, is cultivation of wisdom. It's not just following a pre-planned agenda, right? So I'm not clinging to my choices and decisions. I'm not clinging to my volitional formations here. I'm just letting the retreat go where it needs to go. But at the same time, I'll make sure that I cover the things that I need to cover. So our excursion today is, if you guys would like, we're going to go to Hua Tung Tao, which is this reservoir, recreation area, where normally we eat lunch here and then we go. We're actually just going to go because they have food there, and they have really good food, really delicious food. So can I see a show of hands how many people are planning to go so I can organize transportation? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, Aranda, and then I'm 6. Okay, is that it? Did I cover everyone? Okay, 6. Okay, so we'll actually step outside in the little lobby area, and I'll explain to you guys how we're going to do the transportation. So for all of the rest of you guys, whatever you choose to do today, have a wonderful... Oh, Judy, you're going to? Oh, okay. Oh, sure. So Judy would like me to remind you guys that tomorrow after the retreat at 4 p.m., there's going to be a big community feast, otherwise known as a potluck, whereas if you guys would like to participate, you can come and bring food, and then we're just going to all have a great meal together here at 4 o'clock. And then right after that at 6 o'clock, we have our temple fun night, which is the game night, where we all kind of have like a little party at the temple. We have music playing, we play board games and hang out and have a social event. So if you guys would like to do that tomorrow, you're more than welcome to do that. And you can talk to Judy if you need more information about what food to bring and stuff like that. So, okay. So whatever you guys decide to do today, have a wonderful day. I'm going to start back up at 6:30 with dependent origination and personal existence view. So thank you for your questions. Thank you for the discussion. I'll see you guys a bit later. Okay.